And warmer from the low, welcome to Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. As joining me in segment number 2, it is going to be one of our good friends over there at FTN Bets. You got Mike Randle doing tremendous work. He does the Screen the Screener podcast as well, and you're able to find that wherever you get your podcast. We're going to talk with him about some of the takeaways that he's had from the first few days of the season, what he really looks for when it comes to betting this early on during the season, taking a look at non-conference play, and we're going to be diving into some games for Saturday. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. He is big with regards to coaching this time of year, so we're going to be diving in on that front with Mike in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by that 5-star review. Did not get in any today, but telling you right now, if you have anything that pops up, please do send those in, as we got a long college basketball season, looking to find you guys as many angles as humanly possible, and anything that you want answered, more than happy to lend some insights. So let's take a look back at everything that we got on a rambunctious college basketball Friday, and a little bit of cleanup for Thursday as well, as typically Monday through Thursday I do have to pre-record these just a little bit with regards to recaps. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are my off days with regards to the main VSiN show, so I'm able to do this a little bit later. So let's take a look at what we've all gotten in the last 24 plus hours in college basketball. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Really just 2 games to clean up from Thursday. St. Mary's was able to get a win. They were able to get a cover over New Mexico 72-58, and we just see this in college basketball, in my opinion. It's easier to slow down a fast team than to speed up a slow team, and also helps when Jalen House is out of the fold, as for New Mexico, with Jalen House out, Jamal Mashburn went 3 of 16 from the floor. That right there is doomsday, as St. Mary's, they go 6 of 17 from three-point range, but they did a nice job holding up against New Mexico. Bad free throw shooting in this game, by the way. St. Mary's 16 of 25, New Mexico 8 of 15, so a little bit less than savory there, but St. Mary's was able to win the rebound battle. Aiden Mahaney, 25 points. Nice win, nice cover for St. Mary's. And then Washington, they won, but they did not cover against Northern Kentucky. This was a line that ballooned all the way to 15.5. I am not sure why, but Northern Kentucky was able to get the cover, 75-67, as Northern Kentucky goes just 3 of 17 from three-point range, but Sam Vincent, he did it all in this game, 14 points, 8 boards. I love what he was able to bring to the table. And then for Washington, they went just 3 of 17 from three-point range. Keon Brooks completely bailed them out. 32 points, 10 boards. We're going to have Sean Paul of the Field of 68 on this podcast tomorrow. We're certainly going to be taking a little bit more of a look at the Pac-12 with him, but certainly a pair of interesting games that we saw on Thursday. We got to get to what was a great Friday slate, and this is the best win of the college basketball season thus far. Arizona goes on the road, and they knock off Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium by a count of 78-73. For Arizona, it's not even like they went flamethrower mode or anything from 3. 6 of 17 from distance. Caleb Love, it's not like he had a great game either. 6 turnovers, 11 points, but it was Umar Paulo who was able to do a relatively solid job down low. He and Keshad Johnson combined for 27 points, 13 rebounds, and for Duke, they were just a little bit out of sorts in this game, as well as Kyle Filipowski give the team 25 points, 8 boards. Jeremy Roach delivered 17. Nobody else was in double figures, and I thought that Duke might be going a little bit deeper into their bench, and they did not do so. There was only 2 guys off the Duke bench that played more than 5 minutes. Shows you that John Shire perhaps does not trust these freshmen as much as we might think, and that's a little bit concerning. So, very good win for Arizona. This was also a very rock-solid win. Texas A&M, they go on the road and they knock off The Ohio State University 73-66 on a night where they only shot 3 of 18 from 3. Now, Ohio State, no better. They go 4 of 19 from distance. Bruce Thornton, 24 points for Ohio State, but for Texas A&M, they were able to do a nice job of being able to control the glass in this one as they win that rebound battle 45-35, pulling in 16 offensive rebounds. Henry Coleman III, 20 points, 11 rebounds, and then Wade Taylor the fourth, he did his thing, 21 points, only went 1 of 9 from 3, but even on an off shooting night, he was able to impact the game. That is a very good sign for Texas A&M. A trend that we have been noticing in college basketball, a lot of these big giant favorites have been able to win, and they have been able to cover massive spreads. Now, Texas was not one of them. Against Delaware State, they were up to about a 32.5 point favorite. They win, but they only win by kind of 86-59. Texas dealing with a few injuries. Dylan DeSue is still out of the fold for this team. They're just now getting back Caden Shedrick, who he's been dealing with an ailment. He was only able to play 10 minutes in this one, but for Texas, they also did go 12 of 22 from three-point range. Ithiel Horton, Max Smith, they were able to combine for 37 points, so that's a little bit encouraging, but you saw other teams be able to cover these big numbers. Marquette all over Rider by kind of 95-65, and I will be getting you guys the trends on how good favorites have been here in the first week of the season towards the back half of this segment, so in a few minutes. But Marquette, 13 of 30 from three-point range. Cam Jones, 23 points. Also Ogadero, Sachi Suffer, 13 points, 11 boards, pair of blocks. He looked good, and for Tyler Kolek, he was able to do a nice job in his limited minutes. 6.6 assists, 20 minutes. They didn't need him out there on the floor very much. And for Ryder, just 5 of 19 from three-point range. TJ Weeks Jr., 14 points, 12 boards. That's all that they had to hang their hat on for the Metro Atlantic in general. Not necessarily the world's most savory Fridays. Manhattan, they're unable to cover the Mondo number against Kansas. 99-61 the final. Manhattan was catching about 35.5 to 36, and Hunter Dickinson, he didn't need to play the full game, only 20 minutes, but 18 points, 8 rebounds in those 20 minutes, and you also had a very nice sign out of true freshman Johnny Furphy off the bench. He went for 15 points. He was able to go 6 of 10 from the floor, so Kansas able to roll very easily. Kentucky, they do not cover their bigger number. They were laying about 29.5 against Texas A&M Commerce, 81-61. This one, Commerce, a little bit of an uncharacteristic shooting night, 10 of 27 from three-point range, but still a relatively solid win for them. And then you're able to get a very nice win and cover for Purdue. This did get to closer to 29.5, but Purdue, 87-57. They completely stomped Morehead State. Zach Edey, 18 points, 8 rebounds. They only needed him out there for 24 minutes. And for Morehead State, currently they're dealing with Mark Freeman, their top scorer, being out most likely for the season. And they went 7 of 31 from three-point range. So very easy win for Purdue. You did not see Villanova covered, though, and I had a big differential on the under. I was happy that this one hit. Better than my DK Network Right pick, which that was Michigan versus Youngstown State. I'll get to that in a second. I call myself out when I have bad picks. We celebrate the good ones. We remorse on the bad ones. Villanova 83-57. They win, they don't cover, but they controlled this game. They won the rebound battle 44-28. Lemoyne just got really hot in the first few minutes in this one. They go 9 of 25 from three-point range, and Lemoyne actually had a little bit of a lead through like about 10 or so minutes, and then Villanova was able to take hold from there. And then in regards to the DK Network Right pick, we're still 4-2 on the season. It's a solid start, but I need to be better than to pick against Michigan in this one. Michigan, they were laying in the neighborhood about 16.5 to 17 points on the close. They win by kind of 92-62. Youngstown State, not competitive in this one, 7 of 23 from three-point range, and very impressed by Michigan. Olivier Kamala had 17 points, 10 boards for the team. Doug McDaniel really looking like a good guard, and dare I say, sorry if I anger some people, I feel like Phil Martelli is coaching up this team better than Juwan Howard ever did, so that's been big. Will Cheddar off the bench had 20 points as well. Was not expecting Will Cheddar, the 6'8" combo player, to go 8 of 8 from the floor and 4 of 4 from 3, so Michigan, they land base my Youngstown State pick. We will look to do better today for you guys, but in the Big Ten, you did notice a few teams not cover. Maryland loses outright to Davidson, 64-61. Pretty ghastly loss when you take a look at Davidson. And this was a game where Davidson had 15 turnovers and 21 made buckets. They really didn't have anyone go off in this one off the bench. They had Bobby Durkin be able to supply 16 points. Looks like he's going to be a solid player for the team this season. But for Maryland, they go just 5 of 23 from three-point range. Jameer Young was able to supply 18 points, but the other young guards did not really step up. The freshman and Deshaun Harris-Smith, He had 8 points, pair of turnovers, goes 0 of 3 from three-point range, so that's a little bit of a rough sign. You did see Illinois have a bit of a tough time with Oakland as well. 64-53 the final. Very uncharacteristic of Oakland games if you watch them in recent years. And for Illinois, this was a slog of a game. They did go 8 of 16 at the free throw line as well. You did have Quincy Guerrier be able to supply a double-double, but backcourt did not necessarily look the world's most crisp in this one. And for Oakland, they were able to make this game very yucky, and they were able to hold in there with Trey Townsend, 19 points, 10 rebounds, and back-to-back zero burgers for Rocket Watts. Now, Rocket Watts only played 5 minutes in this one, but man, hey, it's not been going well for him. But Oakland, they've been able to cover each of their first 2 games, so give a little bit of credit where credit is due. And by the way, Iowa now as at least an 18-point favorite, dating back to the beginning of the 2019-20 season. Depending upon your numbers, they either got a push in this one because they opened up more around about a 29 or so point favorite. I'm seeing in some places they close more in that neighborhood, about 31.5, 32. So if you took the opening number, they're now 18-4 against the spread as at least an 18-point favorite. If you took the closing number, more like 17-5, but they win against Alabama State by kind of 98-67, and they have broken the 75-point plateau in every single one of their home games since the beginning of the 2022-23 season. If you're looking at other interesting games from what we all got on Friday, this one really did stand out to me. How about what you were able to get from South Carolina taking down Virginia Tech 79-77? I thought that South Carolina was going to be rough, and I thought Virginia Tech might have a little bit of upside, but South Carolina just went scorched earth from three-point range. Miles Stute, who comes over from Vanderbilt could use him as they did not cover as well on Friday. They were able to get an outright win against USC Upstate, but 0-2 against the spread to begin the season. But Stute, 5 of 6 from three-point range. South Carolina loses the turnover battle 10-5, but they did a nice job on the glass. Virginia Tech only hauled in 23 rebounds in this one. Sean Badula, 26 points, but you can tell that the low post play going to be an issue for Virginia Tech. Good win for South Carolina, though, and Clemson, they escape with their souls against UAB. 77-76 a final, and a back-and-forth, good, fun slobber knocker of a game. P.J. Hall bails out Clemson. He was able to go off for 27 points, 9 boards. Clemson just 17 of 27 at the free throw line. UAB, they go 9 of 22 from 3. Lots of moving parts with the UAB, but they're looking pretty solid as Ephraim Johnson was able to supply 17 points. Eric Gaines, he was able to go off for 18, so that was a fun one. And this is also fun to take a look at. Colorado State being able to put up 105 points. They roll over Wright State 105-77. This was one of the strangest things with regards to a total that we saw on Friday. I thought Memphis and Missouri was going to be a high-scoring game. 70-55. Memphis takes it to Missouri. Missouri goes 6 of 28 from 3. It wasn't even that it was a game that involved like 30 turnovers or anything like that. It was just strangely slow in this one. And for Memphis, you got yourself a very good performance out of David Jones. 10 points, 10 boards. Javon Quinterly provides 18 points. And Missouri, without Kobe Brown, they just look like a completely different team. They had to start Jesus Calderero in the front court. He had as many points as myself, and Caleb Grill did his best with 10 rebounds. But that was a little bit of a less than savory performance. This is also less than savory. Valparaiso loses on their home floor to IUPUI, 66-56. The final. This Valparaiso team is not going to be good. I apologize. I know that there's a few Valparaiso fans that listen to this podcast. I am not doing this to be mean. I'm just calling it what it is. This is not good to say the least. 2 of 16 from three-point range. And for IUPUI, they won the turnover battle in this one by a count of 14-11. IUPUI was able to play even up on the glass. And Bryce Monroe is someone that you do want to take note of. For old UEPUI, he was able to put in their 20 points. Gonzaga thought that they would have some issues with Yale. They did for the first, I'm going to call it about 15, 25 minutes or so. With about 13 minutes left in the second half, that's when Gonzaga was able to pull away. 86-71 the final. Yale does go 9 of 24 from 3 and 14 of 14 at the free throw line. And it's not like Graham Ike had an amazing performance. 11 points, 3 boards. He did provide 3 steals, though, but what really helped out Gonzaga in this one was the fact that they were able to get so much good versatility out of Anton Watson. 11 points, 12 boards, pair of steals, just really stuffed the stat sheet. And for Yale, they got blasted on the glass. They lose the battle 42-28, so good signs for Gonzaga to begin the season. This is also a very good sign if you're a fan of the Southland. Nichols, they are able to win outright against LSU 68-66 as 19.5-point underdogs. There was a point in this game where Nichols was up 44-20. I mean, this was just a ghastly performance from LSU. They go 3 of 19 from 3. Nichols, this was a better 3-point shooting performance than you're typically going to find out of them. 12 of 30 from 3-point range, including Jalen White putting one in the closing seconds that sealed this for good, as LSU actually came back from down 20+ to take the lead, but White was able to hit a 3 with seconds remaining. That was able to push the team to victory for Nichols. They did lose the turnover battle 20-13, but they actually won the rebound battle as well. Nichols didn't go too much into their bench, but the starters, they were able to bring that one home. Also bringing home a nice performance, Alabama, 102-80, the final over Indiana State. I think it's clear that the Alabama defense is not quite what it was a season ago, but the 3-point shooting for the team looks good. Aaron Action Estrada and Mark Sears combined to go 9 of 12 from 3-point range with 51 points. So an over for Alabama and a big giant victory for them. Something else that stood out with regards to the mid-major front, how about Akron and how good they looked against Southern Miss? 72-54, the final. Southern Miss currently playing without Andre Cabello. If you ask me, it's actually a good thing with the way that Andre Cabello has performed in his college basketball career, but Enrique Freeman was able to control things down low, and for Southern Miss, 15 turnovers and 23 made buckets and going 3 of 10 at the free throw line. That's not going to cut it. This is also not going to cut it. West Virginia, as a double-digit favorite, they lose outright to Monmouth. We knew it was going to be rough for West Virginia, and they're currently without Kirk Kriisa, but for West Virginia, 7 of 32 from 3. Meanwhile, Monmouth, who they couldn't catch a cold last year from 3-point range, 10 of 23 from 3. Xander Rice, he has decided to play for his father in King Rice, 30 big points after he was such a good performer at Bucknell last few years. Really nice to see. Massive win for them, and this was also a pretty massive win as well. Chattanooga, they take down Louisville 81-71. Louisville at one point was down, I believe, 20 points in this one. Just embarrassing. Kenny Payne might be the worst power conference coach I've ever seen. And Chattanooga, they're very well coached. You can be off-put by one team and encouraged by another. Very encouraged by Chattanooga. Dan Earl has gotten his guys firing all cylinders. Hunter Huff, who played with him over at VMI, 25 points, 7 of 13 from 3, and Louisville looked brain dead in this one. They actually win the turnover battle 16-15, but they play even up on the glass against a Chattanooga team that doesn't have as much size. For Louisville, they just made silly mistake after silly mistake, and for Chattanooga, did a very nice job being able to maximize from 3-point range. They're able to get the job done there. Also being able to get the job done, Miami, very solid win and cover over Central Florida, 88-72, the final. As for Miami, Wooga Poplar was actually dealing with an injury a few weeks ago. Doesn't look like he's injured right now. 23 big points, 5 of 5 from 3-point range. So love what you're seeing there, and you have to love the fact that Liberty Bibberty was able to take down Charlotte 71-59. This is one where the number mattered if you had the total. Open up at 132, closes 129.5. So always try to get the best of those numbers, but for Liberty, even without Darius McGee, Kyle Rohde, he looked good, 20 points, 4 of 8 from 3-point range. This Liberty team is always consistently one of the slowest in all of college basketball. They just suck the life out of Charlotte, and being able to give you life. Tennessee 80-70, the final over Wisconsin. I don't know why, but seems as though Wisconsin is going to be looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. I can't say that with this roster that's necessarily going to be too successful, but for Tennessee, Dalton Connect, 24 points. He was able to connect on a lot of shots, and on top of that, you've got Zakai Ziegler already back at the fold for Tennessee. He was able to go for 19 minutes. Jordan Gainey, double figures off the bench. Was very impressed by a Tennessee team that won the battle on the glass by count of 35-31, and for Wisconsin, did not get much in general out of the bench. A combined 8 bench points for them. Meanwhile, for Tennessee, off the bench, they had 23 points. That turned out to be the difference in this one. And right now, what has been the difference between making and losing money has been whether or not you've been backing favorites or underdogs in college basketball right now, because the favorites are right now having themselves a ball. 131, 110, and 2 against the spread. That is a 54.4% hit rate for favorites and home teams in general. Home underdogs are 16-13 against the spread. Home teams overall, 134, 107, and 2 against the spread. That is a 55.6% hit rate. Overs are hitting like wildfire as well. The over is hitting at 56.7%. 136 overs, 104 unders, and a push thus far in college basketball with regards to totals. So that's what we're seeing right now, and that's what we all got in college basketball on Friday. Now let's take a look at some takeaways from the early part of the season and a nice Saturday slate with Mike Randle of FTN and FTN Bets on the flip side here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, Mike Randle. He does terrific work over at FTN Network. He is their Chief Content Officer. Coupled with that, he does a great job with his own basketball podcast called The Screener Podcast. You're able to find that podcast wherever you find this fine podcast. Mike does such an amazing job taking a look at this game that we all know and love of basketball, both on the NBA side and the college side. And you're able to find him on Twitter/X over at Randle Rant altogether. And Mike, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great, Greg. Thanks for having me, man. I'm still drinking mimosas on my college basketball betting show because I'm celebrating the first week. I had one on opening day on Monday, and again tonight. We'll be back again tomorrow. But you get it, man. It's a great time, and we're getting information. We're getting data that can help us with our handicapping as we get through the season.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, and there's always going to be those times where we feel vindicated with some of the teams that we were propping up in the offseason. Then there's always going to be those whiffs as well. Like I had Youngstown State on Friday. That was a little bit less than terrific. At the same time, also felt good about James Madison coming into the season. So you feel good about that, where there's quite a bit of give and take when it comes to this time of year. But just in terms of what we've seen, we're almost a week through the college basketball season thus far. What have been some of your big takeaways that you've had thus far?
Greg, I've always had a lean towards great coaches and established programs with sustained success. And early in the season, there are some great lines that we can take advantage of in the betting space. Purdue should be favored by more when they're home. Houston as well. You know that after watching them for all those years. You can't prepare for what Houston does. So Matt Painter, Kelvin Sampson, great players, intense styles of defense. They have won out. Connecticut wins big. So across the board, I've seen some things that just, it's what I expect. I've had some individual coaches that I'm sure you know that I like to fade as well, and that has paid off. But the big one tonight, Greg, that I'm watching, and when this goes up, I think it will have happened already, is Wisconsin and Tennessee. Two teams, Tennessee, Rick Barnes, always good, but struggles in the postseason. And Wisconsin, not a team that has a national following. No one gets excited, but they have a veteran team. They bring back a lot of talent. They're selfless. So great coaches, great programs, and styles have really won out here for me.
Yep, I think that is so important, and that's part of the reason why I've been fading a few teams as well. Like, I was against Louisville, against Chattanooga. We're doing this as they are actually currently at the half, so we're recording this right around like 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, but Chattanooga was taking it to Louisville. I faded them night number one against UMBC as well, and I do think that there is something not just with taking a look at good coaches, but taking a look at coaches like Kenny Payne that has no idea who he's putting into the game, and I think that there is a lot to be able to exploit with regards to those fade teams as well.
Oh, Kenny Payne as well, of course. I think Kenny Payne's going to be back next year. But here's another example. So today, one that hit for me already, you have Liberty, you have Richie McKay. Yes, they lost Darius McGee, 2,300 points, just legendary player, of course. But they bring back a lot of players, core, discipline, style. They're playing Charlotte. It's in a semi-home game in Charlotte, but not in the home arena. And you end up having Ron Sanchez, who left Charlotte, new coach, assistant comes in. They lost their top two players who transferred. Liberty continues to roll. Again, continuity, veterans in those situations. You can take advantage of some lines. That line opened at 5.5, Liberty by 5.5. It dropped to Liberty minus 4.5, grabbed it, and it was a comfortable cover the whole way through.
Yes, and I love this Liberty team moving forward, as well as Mike Randle, who does terrific work over at FTN Network, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with Liberty, I backed them as well. Fortunately, I got the early number on the under that went to 129.5. Game lands 130. So always be taking a look at those overnight numbers and trying to get the best of the number. You never know when getting a 130.5 instead of like a 129.5 is the difference between a win and a loss because it pops up when you least expect it. But I do like these teams with a little bit more of a distinct style. And something else I noticed as well, this holds true for a team like CSUN. They brought in Andy Newman, who was the coach over at Cal State Bernardino at the D2 level. They really pushed the tempo. Just looking at the styles in general as well, I think could be big with regards to a total standpoint as well.
Yes, it does. And it plays into the overs and the unders. You have to be careful, though. Always do your own handicapping. You talk about this all the time because sometimes they set the lines way too low. And you see sometimes in a game where a team is playing a slow pace or a fast pace. Easy one that came to mind was opening night Wisconsin. Right? They put up about 110 points. So sometimes you have to look at it, not just by the style, but how do you think the team is going to be in terms of offense? And do they attack a weakness? If a team is a terrible three-point shooting team and Wisconsin is lighting it up, that game can go over the over because one team can carry it. So styles, coaches, matchups, discrepancies, funnel defenses that allow you to score inside or outside, vice versa, that all plays a part in it, and it's vital. You can't just look at the teams and say they're both slow, therefore it's an under, because, of course, Vegas has adjusted the line. The line itself has been adjusted by the sports books already.
Yes, and I think that is something that is just so big to take a look at because the margins of being able to win/lose are so big. The books, they've got so much intel. So being able to look at an angle like that, I do think is so important to do early on during the season. And we are talking a little bit about totals, and I've had to shade up mine quite a bit. I'm not sure if you've had to or not, but I've been noticing a lot of totals going over because we have just seen a big time amount of jump with regards to these refs calling these fouls. Now, typically, when it comes to the early part of the season, you are going to notice a few more foul calls, but it feels like it's even more rampant this year than it has been in past years because typically in past years, you do get a few more whistles. This year, I feel like it's on steroids.
Yeah, I've been good with the sides and the props. I've struggled with the totals for that very reason. You probably adjusted quicker than I did. I've done it now moving forward, and tonight is going well that I have to adjust to the overs. You talk about the end of the game. You've always mentioned this year after year, the fouls, the extension, certain coaches that you've tracked as well who will extend the game and start fouling with 2-3 minutes left in those situations. That can really extend a game. And I have seen several games that I'm trying to think of one that came to mind that started off very slow, first 5-6 minutes, like 6-4, 8-6, and it still flies over the over because you get that 5 minutes of a frenetic pace. So yes, the way the game is called, neutral versus home, and if a team has a history and a coach has a history of fouling, absolutely.
Yeah, and I just still remember a few years ago, one of the most infamous examples, Danny Manning, when he was over at Wake Forest, would foul down 20 with like 30 seconds left, and it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like every single time, it's like, oh, we're going to get this under out. He fouled down 20 with 15 seconds left. So that was always something that I had to take note of, as Mike Randle does great work over at Fade the Noise FTN. That's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with regards to teams that you might be a little bit more stock up / stock down on, I fully recognize, and I always think that this is very important. Don't make like rash overreactions to like one or two games or anything like that. But has there been a team or two that has really caught your eye in the first game or two that they played, and you're like, all right, maybe I'm not going to jump them up by like 5 points in my power rankings or anything like that, but they're on your radar as a team that you might be nudging up just a smidge right now?
Oh, you're right off the bat, and you mentioned it. I was on the other side of Michigan tonight, too, with Youngstown State. Granted, they have not played the highest level of competition, although you and I both know how good UNC Asheville was, and Drew Pember got into foul trouble in that first game against Michigan. However, they are shooting the ball at an incredible clip these first two games. They're pounding Youngstown State today, shot 46% from three-point range in the opening game against Asheville. Phil Martelli, of course, subbing in for Juwan Howard. I mean, that has got to be the greatest assistant coach in college basketball to have Phil Martelli on the sidelines. It's a Bayesian process. It's a fluid process. I made a lot of money fading Michigan last year. I am not doing that right now. Now I have to take a look at it. I think we'll know a lot about them on Monday when they play St. John's away. That's a big one. But Doug McDaniel, I was very high on coming into the year. I was not high on the Tennessee transfer Olivier Nkamwa. He has impressed me. So again, I have to reconsider. That's one for me that is a stock up that I was not as normally high on. Iowa State was a team that I loved coming in, and they've done nothing to prove me wrong. And tonight is a big game with Florida and Virginia because I am high on Florida. I'm a little cooler on Virginia because I don't think Ryan Dunn is ready to make the impact that the Virginia fans on social media are killing me for. Listen, he may end up being a top 10 pick. I just don't see him right now as that dominant player, but they're doing well early right now. those are the teams that have sort of caught my eye. And I do expect Texas A&M to get to the window over Ohio State today because I love what Buzz Williams is doing. They were picked second in the SEC preseason poll. They should have been first. I love that Texas A&M team.
Yep, I think that Texas A&M and Tennessee are two of the class teams with regards to the SEC as well. Texas A&M was in my top three coming into the season as well. I think Tennessee might be the better regular season team, but I think that Texas A&M might be able to also be the team that goes farther in the NCAA tournament. I think that two things can be true there because I do need to see it to believe it when it comes to Tennessee being able to get the job done in March, but certainly going to be one to take note of there. As joining me on the show, we do have Mike Randle, who does great work over at FTN Bets, and do want to get some of your thoughts on the games for Saturday. Not quite as rambunctious as the ones for Friday. I mean, Arizona versus Duke, Tennessee versus Wisconsin. You mentioned the Texas A&M game. We got a lot of good action, but I am just so intrigued by what we're going to be getting in terms of a bounce-back spot for Kent State, who just lost in incredible fashion. For James Madison to get 5 points with 4 seconds remaining with the ball on their side of the court. They had to throw a full court pass, get that three, get the turnover, and then get a bucket just to force overtime. Now they go up against Fresno State, as currently I'm seeing about 2.5 to 3 on this game. With Kent State, they did open up as 2-point favorites, so they've taken a little bit of money. But I take a look at this Kent State team, and I think there might be a little bit of an overreaction to that soul-crushing loss, because I look at Fresno State, a team that was up only 4 against Fresno Pacific, a non-D1 team, about a few days ago, and I just don't think that Fresno State's going to be able to hold in this game.
No, I agree with you. Rob Senderoff does an amazing job in the MAC with Kent State. That is a rough game. Listen, you know how good James Madison is. They have proven it now. That game went to double overtime. Obviously, the charge call, everything went from there. Again, a bounce back. That's exactly what it is. They are home. Am I going to be afraid of laying a point? You said it was 2 points with Kent State at home, losing potentially back-to-back games with Rob Senderoff? I don't think so. I expect Kent State to bounce back. I see this as a knee-jerk reaction that we're able to take advantage of. Just like tonight, we were looking at Louisville, who came off of a win, but you and I both know there's some shaky things there. I'm taking Kent State in this game against Fresno. They're home 2 games in a row. I don't think there's a lingering effect. I think that is a tough James Madison team that can make the tournament this year. Shout out to Gus Kearns on the Screen to Screener podcast, my co-host. He's a JMU alum. He's so excited. But I think Kent State takes it tomorrow. I agree. One of my target spots.
Yep, I'm right there with you. That is going to be a game that you're going to hear featured a little bit more in the final segment. That is one that I really do like. And I think that this spot is very intriguing as well, because Providence is a team that I feel rather lukewarm on, I think is the best way of being able to put it. I don't think they're going to be amazing, but at the same time, I think that Kim English is a solid coach. Did a good job bringing a few guys with them by the transfer portal over from George Mason, but they play against a pesky UW Milwaukee team. Now, Horizon League let me down on Friday with Youngstown State, but UW Milwaukee is catching between 16.5 and 17, and to me, I felt like this game should have been more in the low/mid teams rather than currently at 16.5 to 17. Not sure how you feel about both of these teams, but I think that Milwaukee might be a little bit of a plucky underdog for Saturday.
Completely agree, because they were great at defending the three-pointer last year, and that's going to be critical against Providence. You also have Providence in a look-ahead spot here. Tuesday, they have Wisconsin. That's going to be a big battle, and then Kansas State. So they beat Columbia easily, pull away in their first game. There's a long layoff to playing a Milwaukee team that you know they're not going to be up against. They were not great from the free throw line. They were not great from three-point range. This is going to be a little tricky. And the other thing that bothers me, a lot of turnovers for this Providence team in that first game against Columbia. So agree, sleepy spot. Wisconsin, Kansas State coming up here. I like Milwaukee. It's too many points here for a Milwaukee team who's well coached with Bart Lundy, who's going to be very, very disciplined here.
Yes, I love Bart Lundy as a coach. I know you were talking about good coaching a few minutes ago, and that's a guy that I'm very much stuck up on. He was amazing at Queens, and he really got that UW Milwaukee program turned around year number 1, as we do have Mike Randle of FTN Bets joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I know you were talking a lot about scheduling spots. How much does that play a role in your handicap? Because I know that there's a lot of people that they're algorithm-based with the way that they set their handicaps, the way that they make their own projected totals or projected sides and everything like that. But for me, I do have a little bit more of a go-by-feel style. I don't have an algorithm, but I certainly do take a look at scheduling spots like few nights ago when SMU was playing in a back-to-back, and 3 out of 4 nights I took Lamar. That was one that I thought was a good scheduling spot, turned out to come to fruition. And I know that we were talking about trying to find edges with regards to trying to beat the books, and I do think that when it comes to taking a look at the schedule itself, that is always something that sometimes the books have a little bit of a tough time with, and I think that those can be some of the best edges to find in this portion of the college basketball season.
Agree. I can't lead with that. I think people make mistakes sometimes and lead with the sleepy spot, the look ahead spot, the back-to-back. That can't be the initial look. You do your power rankings, you come up with your number, then you look at the totality. I really equated, Greg, to poker. You have to know the math. You can't just go in and play by feel. You have to have a mathematical foundation, but there is something in your gut that tells you when you're sitting across from a player that you know that they have it or they're bluffing. So in this situation, totally agree. I think if there's a back-to-back, there's a sleepy spot. If that's the sprinkles on the Sunday, if I've done my handicap and I say, you know what, I kind of like Milwaukee in this game, and then you look at the schedule and then you see those external factors, those narrative-based that pack it in, that's when I really like it and I move forward. So you can't just use one data point. You say this all the time. Every game is its own separate entity, so you can't just lead with that. But if you look at a variety of variables that you set up your handicap and you say, you know what, this is adding up to be a good thing, when that a sort of look ahead, scheduling, everything you're talking about come into play. The other one too I use, which is narrative based, is revenge game. When a player's go against their former team, they just seem to be more focused. Now, I don't know if that's for sure, but I'm not just going to go with that with like a prop, let's say. But you know, when you have a situation like, for example, St. Mary's plays New Mexico. I really liked New Mexico last night, but St. Mary's has only lost 2 games in the last 36 or 38 at home in Moraga, and one of them was to New Mexico, and that was when Aiden Mahaney had not really developed yet as a freshman. So I hit a Mahaney ladder last night. I hit St. Mary's and laid the points. I wasn't just leading with the fact that it was a revenge game. I was leading with the fact that Morris Udeze is not back for New Mexico, so they're going to be a little weak inside. St. Mary's is very solid. Mahaney's a year older. And oh, by the way, there is a revenge spot here as well.
And always looking at sort of the hometown guy getting a game on the road against a school that is very near and dear to where he played his high school basketball. Yes. It's always something to take a look at as well, because there are quite a few mid-majors that'll do that. And if you're able to pick up on that, typically these underdogs, like I know Bucknell did it a lot, like when Mike Muscala went up against Minnesota. He was a guy that was from Minnesota, and Bucknell scared the bejesus out of Minnesota in that game. Yes. I mean, that's always something that I do take a look at. So I think that is a great point that you bring up as well. And is this a time of year as well? Because you were mentioning it with Houston. Houston has been able to cover a lot of big numbers. I actually laid that big number against Louisiana Monroe. I was able to get there with them. Do you use some of these historical trends with teams that maybe are covering these big lines? Like Iowa's another one that I took over North Dakota earlier in the week because I had noted that Iowa was at least 18-point favorite. I covered 16 out of their last 20 in that circumstance. I don't use trends a lot in college basketball, but I feel like early on during the season with these big spreads, it can be one of the few times where the trend can sort of be your friend.
Yeah, again, trend is something that you have to look because you may have a lot of turnover with a team, could be very different, but there are certain trends that if they happen over and over again, I'm going to really like. One of them I'm looking at, I've noticed, Greg, Bradley is dominant at home. Bradley last year, 13-2 against the spread at home, covering by an average of 10 points. So we're looking at a Bradley team that's home again, Missouri Valley. They beat UAB by 2 away. That was a big win. Now they have Utah State at home. Again, that's a game. Looking at it, I'm going to handicap, look at it later, but that's probably one where I am leaning towards Bradley, only because year after year, I have seen Bradley in these situations. How about all those battles between Bradley and Drake the last few years that they have played well at home? So that is one, if it happens repetitively, and I've bet it, and it's come through for me, and I look at the numbers, I say, you know what, that's my lean. Let's see if the matchup in the handicap, the offense versus defense, and Ken Palm and Torvik and all the numbers that you use, if that comes out in your power rankings. But yes, it trends happen for a reason. When you have something that you think is gold that maybe the books aren't as wise to, do they know that Bradley is that dominant at home last year? I don't know if they do. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't factor it in as much. So yes, trends by themselves don't mean much. Trends is part of the totality of the handicap, 100%.
Yep, and I am right there with you on that Bradley spot as well. I was willing to lay up to about a 6 with them, seeing that Same. Between 5 and 5.5. So as long as we don't go up too much, because you'll notice some college basketball team, if this gets up to like 7 to 8, that's a point of no return. But certainly at this current number as we are recording, I certainly am taking a look at that. And is there anything else on the card that you do have highlighted for Saturday, whether it's a bet that you've already made or maybe it's one that you haven't made yet, but you're gauging it overnight and you're feeling a little bit just on the fence a bit about it, and perhaps you might be able to get there in the AM on it.
Hey, I'm laughing because we just talked about this. It ties in perfectly. So Canisius St. Bonaventure. St. Bonaventure, a lot of turnover here. Yes, Mark Schmidt's a phenomenal coach. No argument there. Wish he came to my alma mater, Boston College, coach. But Canisius versus St. Bonaventure, proximal game, New York, 14 points, veteran Canisius team here, played well in their opening game, really hung around in that matchup, playing St. Bonaventure, getting 14. I think that's a little bit high. It struck me as high at the beginning. People think St. Bonaventure, obviously very tough at home, and they certainly are. But that Syracuse game, Canisius, they played well there against Syracuse, who's playing differently, man-to-man under Adrian Autry, put 77 points up in the Carrier Dome. Now you're giving them a lot of points. Reggie Witherspoon, they shoot well from three. Kind of think that's a little too high, even though St. Bonaventure is a very good team at home. A lot of turnover with the Bonnies.
Yep, I do think that St. Bonaventure is going to be one of the better teams out there in the Atlantic 10, and you really feel for Malachi Smith over there at Dayton, his season, his son, and that was a Dayton team that I'd like to be able to win that conference. At St. Bonaventure in my top three is one of the beneficiaries of that, but right there with you, I feel like that number got a little bit out of whack. I'm going to be taking the double figures with Canisius as well, and I always do my best when it comes to being able to get a chat with you, Mike, because you do such an incredible job over at FTN. You're doing so much with regards to college basketball, but on top of that, you're doing a great job with your NBA props, taking a look at the game of football. I know you do a great work just all across the board over there at FTN. You're their chief content officer, so let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, follow me on X at Randle Rant. We have our college basketball betting show is going to be tomorrow at 11 o'clock. 20 minutes, go around, do all my picks that I like on Saturday. We're going 3 days a week, but we change each week, of course, because the schedule is a little up and down right now. But FTN Fantasy, FTN Bets, FTN Daily, we have so many great things going on. Our college basketball model is hitting totals, NFL, Aaron Schatz, DVOA. We have you covered across the board here. Not sleeping, but we'll sleep in April, right, Greg? But it's a great time. Thanks so much for having me, man. I always appreciate it. You're one of the best.
Always appreciate Mike. He does such a tremendous job taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every time he joins this podcast, I feel like we get quite a bit smarter and feel that way once again today. So big thanks to Mike for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be able to get Mike Randle aboard. He does great work over at FTN Bets, doing an incredible job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. He does a podcast of his own called The Screener Podcast. Wherever you get this podcast, you're able to find that The Screener Podcast. It is always great to be able to get him aboard, a wealth of knowledge when it comes to college basketball, and he, much like myself, loves taking a look at this sport all 12 months out of the year. So big thanks to Mike for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81. As per usual, we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is because when you go to Las Vegas, instead of saying, oh, I want to place a bet on Georgia Southern, you'd instead give the ticket writer the rotation number of 607. So that's why we do rotation order. And with regards to normal Las Vegas board, it's more of the bigger conferences, and then conferences like the America East, the Patriot League, the Atlantic Sun, the MEAC, the SWAC. Those are the conferences that are at the bottom. The Southland is in there as well. So let's get things started with a game that tips off at 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. So all-day hoops on Saturday, 6:01, 6:02 on the betting board. Miami of Ohio is going to be playing us to Texas State. Texas State finds themselves anywhere between a pick'em to a 1-point underdog. Total on this game is anywhere between 137.5 and 138.5. I did set my total at 128.5. I am going to be diving in on the under. I do think that Miami of Ohio going to be looking to play a little bit more slowly this year. They didn't play super duper up tempo last season, and take a look at this overall team. They just don't necessarily have a lot of explosive guard play. They do bring in from Northern Illinois, Darweshi Hunter. He was able to have 21 points in the season opener. Last season did shoot 42% from three-point range while being out there in the MAC, but this team is very much lacking in the backcourt. But I did have to set Miami of Ohio as a 2.5-point favorite because I am just completely out on this Texas State team. Texas State was completely based around Mason Harrell last year. Now they're looking to Josh O'Garrow to be able to elevate this team. Someone who was at San Jose State a few seasons ago and didn't even see a lot of run over at San Jose State. They've got a few pieces returning down low from a season ago, like Tyrell Morgan, who was able to give the team about 6 boards per contest, but his team tries to play super duper slow. They have no three-point shooting to speak of, and you could tell just how out of sorts this backcourt was night number 1 against Little Rock. They had 22 turnovers, and it's an improved Little Rock team, but that is very not great, to say the least. I do think that they're going to be able to do a halfway decent job down low. Brandon Love looked very impressive night number 1, 6'9" big man, and for Miami of Ohio, it is a little bit intriguing to see some of their splits with regards to some of these guys down low. You were expecting something out of Anderson Marmbeau. He has yet to be able to take the floor. It seems like he's dealing with some sort of an unreported injury. Julian Lewis played night number 1, but he only played 1 minute after he was a part-time starter last season. But I do think that for Miami of Ohio, the backcourt is a little bit better. And with this being a home game for Miami of Ohio at a strange time, I do think that that gives them a little bit of an edge. And I do typically shade down my totals when it comes to these early games. I do think that Texas State is going to stick to their guns of playing super duper slow, grimy. So I did set this total at a 128.5. I'm going to be willing to take the under. And when it comes to Miami of Ohio, set them as a 2.5-point favorite. So taking them as a pick'em / a very slight favorite to go along with the under. 603, 604 on the betting board. Arkansas State, it's a road face-off against Bowling Green. Bowling Green is a favorite of 2 points, and total on this game anywhere between 152.5 and 155.5. Quite a range with regards to the total. I think we went just a touch high, though. I do think that Arkansas State going to be playing quite up-tempo this season. I did set my total at a 152.5, so now that we're getting up to a 155.5, going to be looking at the under. Opener was actually, by the way, a 151.5, but when it comes to Arkansas State, I had to set them as a little bit of an underdog, even though I do like a lot of the pieces that were brought in. Brian Hodgson, he was a assistant over at Alabama. He has brought with him quite a bit of talent. Freddie Hicks was the top scorer over at Tarleton State last season. 21 points in that season opener against Wisconsin. DeAndre Dominguez is someone that at 6'8", he's able to pop some threes. You have guys like Avery Feltz that return from a season ago as well, but this team did not play a lick of defense. When you give up 107 points to Wisconsin, I do think that they'll get it through their skulls that they need to play a little bit more defense, but that's a little bit off-putting. And for Bowling Green, it's a new dawn and a new day with Todd Simon taking over, but he did bring with him a few pieces over from his time with Southern Utah, including Jason Spurgeon, someone who's right around 6'10", is able to do a nice job of being able to hit the glass, and he pairs up very well with one of the remaining pieces from last season in Rashawn Agee, who last year at Bowling Green, about 10 points, 6 rebounds per contest. Do love his overall game. And then I think under the radar, the Ohio transfer in Sam Towns might be able to have a nice season last year. At about 6 points, 4.5 boards, just was unable to put the ball in the basket from 3, but at 6'9", has a little bit of versatility. I do think that we're starting to get a little bit too lofty on this total. I set my total at a 152.5. Bowling Green going to be looking to play up-tempo. Todd Simon, his system does very much call for that, but at the same time, I think Arkansas State, after giving up 105 points to Wisconsin, they're going to realize, we might need to play a little bit more defense. So I do expect a little bit of reversal there, and it might be a little bit too much of a reversal for them just on the fly. So this is a spot where I did set my total at a 152.5. Going to be taking a look at north of a 152.5 under, and with Bowling Green, set them as a 4.5-point favorite, so one to lay up to 4 with them. 605, 606 on the betting board. Louisiana Monroe is on the road facing up against Central Michigan. Central Michigan is a favorite of 3.5 to 4 points. Totals anywhere between 138 and 139.5. With Central Michigan, I did set them as a favorite of 3 points. So being able to get north of 3, I am going to be in on Louisiana Monroe. Just really hard to be able to back a Central Michigan team that does have one nice scorer returning in Brian Taylor. Last season, he was Mr. Do-It-All for this team, was able to log 14.5 points, 6 boards. Not a great three-point shooter, but at 6'6", lends good versatility. But what are you going to be able to get down low? You do have one guy that's able to do a pretty nice job on the glass, Marquise Harding, last year. 4 boards, 9 points per game. So I mean, there's a modicum of success there, but past that, you don't really have a lot of size with this team, and you just don't have a lot of three-point shooting in general. Night number 1, the team shot 19% from 3. They had 17 turnovers in a game where they got lambasted against Oklahoma. Meanwhile, for Louisiana Monroe, they scored 31 points against Houston. Now, typically that's shameful, but as we know, Houston is one of the best offensive teams in all of college basketball. You figure that they'd be outgunned, but I think that Tariq LaCour has a chance to be able to go toe-to-toe with Brian Taylor in this game. Tariq LaCour shot 37% from 3, 14.5 points, nearly 3 assists, just under 2 steals per contest last season, and the guy that's being slept on a little bit, Nika Merkashavelisi. Hopefully I said that correctly. I'm sure that I didn't. The 6'8" gentleman from Georgia named Nika. We are going to go with that. He last season was limited to just 5 games. When he played a full allotment of minutes during the 2021-22 season, was putting in there 10 points, 4.5 boards, nearly a steal per contest, mid-30s three-point shooter. That's versatility that Central Michigan just does not have. Now, with Louisiana Monroe, they really don't have any size whatsoever. They were hoping that A.D. Diadu was going to be able to give you a little bit of something coming over from UAB. He has yet to be able to produce anything for this bunch. They're looking to someone like Kelton Williams as a freshman to be able to elevate this team as well. It just has not been happening in general for Louisiana Monroe. So I do think that Central Michigan has a little bit of size down low. Anthony Pritchard, relatively solid point guard coming over from Tulsa, but Central Michigan also really doesn't have a lot of depth. It's a game of something's got to give with a pair of rough offenses, a pair of rough defenses. I do think that we are going to be seeing a little bit of late game fouling in a game that I think involves 2 bad teams coming down to the wire. I set Central Michigan as a 3-point favorite, so being able to get 3.5 or more with Louisiana Monroe, I'm going to be willing to take those points. Did set my total at a 141 as well, so going to be taking a look at the over to go along with those points. 607, 608 on the betting board. Georgia Southern is going to be on the road facing off against Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan is a underdog of between 1.5 and 2 points. Total is between 144.5 and 145. I set Georgia Southern as a 5-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this number. Eastern Michigan just doesn't have a high level of talent. I do like what Tyson Acuff is able to bring to the table. Tyson Acuff came over from Duquesne a few seasons ago. Last year was a nice little Robin to Amani Bates, 14 points, 2.5 assists, mid-30s three-point shooter. So you do have a bit of upside with him. Past that, this is a relatively rough unit that doesn't have a lot of rebounding to speak of. They're going to be looking at Legend Geeter, who last year he was able to Geeter done with right in the neighborhood about 4 rebounds per game. We shall see what he's going to be able to do moving forward. And then on the flip side for Georgia Southern, this is a team that's in quite a bit of transition because a season ago, Andrei Seversov, he was the main guy with 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I absolutely love the versatility that he was able to bring to the table, but they do bring in Malik Tidwell. Tidwell is someone that comes in from the non-D1 level, was one of the better non-D1 transfers in my opinion at the just overall mid-major level, and I do think that he's going to be able to help out this team at 4 assists in the team's first game of the season, and his team does have some size and versatility. You do have Carlos Curry down low. Curry last season was able to deliver 7 boards, 7.5 points per contest. He's going to be a nice little post presence for this team. On top of that, got someone in Cam Bryant who does stand right in the neighborhood about 6'7", 6'8". He has been in the past very good in terms of being able to lend production with like 4 boards, 7.5 points per game 2 seasons ago. Last year was just all sorts of banged up. I think a clean bill of health for him is going to be very big. And when it comes to this Georgia Southern team, I do think that they are going to be able to do a nice job of taking away the fact that Eastern Michigan just likes to get very 3-point happy in general because they don't necessarily have a lot of size down low and they just don't have a lot of guys that are able to take the top off of a defense with regards to their 3-point shooting as well. Recipe for disaster. So a circumstance where I did set Georgia Southern as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Eastern Michigan last year, a bottom 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Georgia Southern, not necessarily an up-tempo team. I did set my total at 145. This opened up at a 143 right now, sitting between 144.5 and 145. 144.5 is the max I'm willing to go over on, but willing to go over to go along Georgia Southern. 609, 610 on the betting board. Georgia State, they hit the road. They are facing off against Western Michigan. Western Michigan finds themselves as underdogs at home of anywhere between 4 and 4.5 points. Totals anywhere between 145 and 146. And with this Georgia State bunch, I did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points. At the 4, it is the max I'm willing to lay, but I am going to be willing to lay the number with Western Michigan, certainly a squad that has lacked success in recent years. That goes without saying, but the big thing for Western Michigan is that they just don't have any sort of a backcourt whatsoever. They actually have a few guys that I like down low. Titus Wright is able to give you some nice rebounding, had 11 rebounds to lead off the season against North Dakota State in that overtime loss last year, about 8 points, 5 boards. He's able to give you a little bit of production down low, and B. Artis White looks like he's back at full force. B. Artis White missed the entirety of last season, and if you go back to the 2020-21 season, was a 42% three-point shooter, 14.5 points per contest, fell off the table the season after that, but there's not a lot of support around him. Meanwhile, you've got a Georgia State team that you do bring back quite a few of the guys from a season ago. Now, those guys last season were one of the worst cover teams in all of college basketball, but I do like the outlook of Brendan Tucker. 2 seasons ago at College of Charleston, had about 11.5 points per game, shot 38.5% from three-point range. Darius Odom is the guy that's able to dole out the ball as a complete liability from three-point range, but he last season 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 13 points per contest. If he's able to find guys like Leslie Incarium and company in space, this could be a little bit of a dangerous team, and they did add a little bit of size as well. 6'10", Eduardo Nakomo, he's able to give you some good rebounding after last season. He was a part-time starter that was more of a just back to the basket rim protector, and for Western Michigan, team that I think is going to have a tough time being able to dole out the ball. 15 turnovers against North Dakota State is more like 20 against any other team. North Dakota State last year was like dead last in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a sloppy game as a result, and Georgia State, they were all over the place with regards to their tempo and their style last year, so I did set my total at a 140.5. I do think that Georgia State going to be looking to hold their head a little bit more on defense under Jonas Hayes this season, so it is a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at the total under, and with Georgia State, I did set them as favorites of 4.5 points, so willing to lay up to 4 with them. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. George Washington is going to be playing us to William and Mary. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but take the Tribe, you're able to get between 8.5 and 9 points in your total on this game. It is 146, and with William and Mary, I needed at least 9 to be able to get there with them, but I am going to be willing to take the 9 with old Bill and Mary, as for William and Mary, one of the few original college basketball teams who never make the NCAA tournament, but I do think that for William and Mary, they hold in there against the George Washington team that last year was one of the bottom teams in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For George Washington, they do have one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. That would be James Bishop IV, just 5 points in night number 1, but last year averaged 20 points per contest. You know that that's going to be ticking upward, and I like what you're able to get out of Max Smith Edwards as well. Edwards last year, 6.5 boards, 7.5 points, mid-30s three-point shooter, 6'5", do-it-all sort of player, but depth is a big-time issue with this team, along with not having a lot of rebounding in general. And then you take a look at William and Mary. They did lose Ben White and company from a season ago, but Gabe Dorsey, I do think, is going to be solid in the backcourt. Last year, shot 44.5% from 3. He's going to be playing a little bit more on the ball this year, so I do think that usage increases, and should see a little bit of a decrease with regards to his overall numbers, but someone like a Trey Moss, I think, is going to be able to do a rock-solid job coming over from South Florida, be able to give the team some scoring in the backcourt. They are going to be relying upon a smaller team, as Jake Karasinski is going to be one of your main guys down low at 6'7". He's a bit of a versatile player that shot 35.5% from three-point range, but with George Washington not really having a lot of size themselves, that Achilles heel of William and Mary not going to be exposed quite as much, and it is a very interesting tempo style as well. George Washington is a team that they look to run it and gun it. William and Mary was in the bottom 40 in terms of possessions per game last season. I do think that George Washington going to be looking to go a little bit more defense-oriented. We saw them give up just 44 points against Stonehill. Now, I don't think that they're going to be duplicating that on a consistent basis, as Stonehill went 5 of 33 from 3 and 15 of 70 overall from the floor, but I do think that William and Mary going to continue a little bit of a slow grinder style, so I do like this total under. Set my total 138.5, and with William and Mary, we'll take 9 or more with them. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board is Cornell on the road facing up against Fordham. Fordham is a 1.5 point favorite. Open up as a pick 'em. Total is anywhere between 148 and 148.5. Another interesting spot with a Fordham team that they look to play a little bit more up-tempo, but they really do look to hold their head on defense. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you got yourself a Cornell team that does look to play super duper up-tempo. They love taking threes. As a result, I did set this total at 150. I'm going to be willing to go over, but I do think that Fordham wins from within, which is why I did set them as a 4-point favorite. Even though Reed Norkovsky is out of the fold, you've still got Abdul Simbilia, who last season he was able to give this team nearly 2 blocks, 6 boards per contest, That should be very big against a Cornell team that they really just don't have a ton down low. Cornell wasn't the world's worst rebounding team, but they really didn't have a guy that gave you north of 5.5 rebounds per contest a season ago. They do have a lot of guys that are able to light it up from three-point range. Keller Booth, 2 seasons ago, shot darn near 50% from three-point range. Gotta love the game of Chris Mannon, who last season didn't shoot it well from three, but had 11 points. He had 2.5 steals per contest. And Cornell, they will gamble for a few turnovers when it comes to the defensive side of things as well. If they don't get a turnover, they're going to leave you open for a shot. But I just don't know how guys like Guy, Ragland, and company are going to be able to match up down low. Got a Fordham team that's in a little bit of transition with their backcourt, but you fought Metter, who comes in from UT San Antonio. He was a double-figure scorer for them last year. Didn't do a lot of facilitating, but night number 1 was able to have 6 assists. I feel very encouraged by what I'm seeing out of him. And then you're able to couple that with Will Richardson. No, not the one that was at Oregon, but guy that last season was able to be very solid in this backcourt, shot 42% from three-point range. I do think that Antrell Charlton, just a good glue guy in general, should be able to help out as well. And I do think that Fordham has maybe not as much depth as Cornell. Cornell is typically looking to go about 9 or 10 deep, but I do think that Fordham going to be able to get the job down low. I do think that this is going to be an up-tempo game that could involve some late-game fouling to be able to help out with this total over. So I did set my total at 150. Going to be looking at the over. And Fordham, very good home court advantage as well. Going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 615, 616 on the betting board. Ball State plays us to Old Dominion. Old Dominion is a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite. Totals anywhere between 140.5 and 142. For Old Dominion, I did set them as 1.5 point favorites. Mostly seeing 1 out there, and I'm willing to lay that very minuscule number when it comes to Old Dominion. They do just such a nice job with their defense, consistently a team that's in the bottom 75 of the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they go up against a squad in Ball State that they don't necessarily play super duper up tempo, but I mean they look to be able to get a lot of wide open threes, and I don't think that they're going to be able to have as many of those this year with Jalen Sellers now being out of the fold, but they still do have a few guys in the backcourt that I do think they're going to be able to elevate this team just a touch. But you do take a look at what you're able to get on the flip side for Old Dominion. This team is a very grizzled team with Chauncey Jenkins, who's been around the block. He looked very good night number 1, being able to log 16 points. Piggyback off of a season last year where shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, 13.5 points, a steal, 3 assists. I really like what he's able to bring to the table. And then you're able to couple that with RJ Blakeney. Came over from Dayton. Didn't have supreme numbers last year at Dayton, but 2 years ago, shot about 35.5% from 3, 6.5 points. Was a nice, versatile cog for that team, and I do think that that's going to be tough for Ball State to be able to match up with. Jihad Brashear, he looked very good night number 1, but this is a Ball State team that they really do lose a lot of those heart and soul pieces from a season ago. Peyton Sparks was so good down low for this team, and they really didn't have a lot of rebounding. As a matter of fact, they pretty much lost each of their top 4 scorers from a season ago. So it is a Ball State team in a little bit of transition, and as a result, I do think that a little bit more of a grizzled Old Dominion team that has just a nature of being able to slow down games, make them a bit more defense oriented, going to be able to win out in this ordeal, which is why I did set my total at a 135.5. I think Old Dominion wins a tempo battle. I think that they win the war. Willing to lay up the 1 with Old Dominion, and going to be taking a look at the under. 617, 618 on the betting board. Notre Dame is going to be playing us Western Carolina. Western Carolina is an underdog of 4 to 4.5 points. Totals between 141 to 141.5 with Western Carolina. Set them as underdogs of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Notre Dame. Does Notre Dame has the world's most talent? Oh, heck no, they do not. But what this Notre Dame team does have is a very good coach in Micah Shrewsbury that I think is going to be able to get the most out of these guys. You saw Marcus Burton have 29 points, night number 1, probably the best freshman that came in for Notre Dame. Now, I don't think that he's going to be able to carry that over much more moving forward, but he and Kerry Booth seem to be making themselves a nice 1-2 punch. You bring in Kiba Njai, who was a part of that Penn State team that was able to make the NCAA tournament a season ago. Julian Roper has a little bit of ability as well, so I do like the overall upside of this Notre Dame team. We'll see if Njai is able to get out there on the floor because they're going to need him with the versatility of Ontravius Woolbright and company. Woolbright, 6'6", do-it-all sort of player that last season over at Western Carolina, he stuffed the stat sheet. 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, 5 assists, steal per contest. The one thing that he really doesn't do is shoot threes, and with this Notre Dame team, they can be at quite a bit with regards to teams that are able to light it up from three-point range. Now, Western Carolina as a whole shot 45.5% from three-point range, night number 1, but that was against a non-D1 team. If you take a look at what they did for the entirety of the 2022-23 season, much more pedestrian. You do have someone, though, in Trey Jackson that is able to take over a game. He was very good from 3 last year, shot 42.5% from 3, 16 points per contest, very good primary scorer that came over from Iowa State, and then should be able to get something down low out of Bernard Pilati last season, low 33-point shooter, about 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, 6'8", a little bit of a versatile, do a little bit of this and that guy. But I do think that for South Carolina, they're just going to get out-schemed in this game. And I do think that for Notre Dame, they are going to be able to hold up on their home floor. And I do think that they're going to be able to do just enough down low with Booth and company to be able to get this one to the window. Did set Notre Dame as a favorite of 6 points, so I'm going to be one to lay. Did set my total at 136. Notre Dame, very slow, controlled team. Western Carolina has their deficiencies on defense, but this is a little bit of a more mid-tempo team, so I do think that things are going to be calmed down just a little bit in this game. Going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be one to lay with the Fighting Irish. 619, 620 on the betting board. North Dakota State is on the road facing off against Creighton. Creighton, favorites of 22.5 to 23.5 points in your total on this game. It is between 147 and 148. Opener on this game was 22.5, and given an option between laying 22.5 and taking 23.5, as I did set my handicap at a 23. I'd rather lay the points. We have seen a lot of these big favorites be able to cover throughout the entirety of the season thus far, and I do think that this Creighton team is one of the best teams in all of college basketball. Down low, Ryan Kalkbrenner. He is just absolutely incredible with the way that he's able to block shots. If you need him to at 7 feet tall, he's able to pop a few threes. This guy is just all sorts of versatile. And then you got Frederick King, who's also a very good rebounder as well. Now, Andrew Morgan, he is someone that should be able to take over the reins down low after you lose Grant Nelson in the offseason to Alabama. He last year 10.5 points, 5.5 boards. True 6'10" big man that is able to pop a few threes. Not necessarily going to take a ton of them, but throughout his career, he's been able to have that ability. The one thing that I think hurts North Dakota State is that they really have not been able to find a primary ball handler. Now, you do have a good go-to scorer in Bowden Skunberg, who conference play last year had well north of 15 points per contest and should be able to get a little bit of support of Damari Wheeler-Thomas, who was able to emerge a bit towards back half of last season as well with about 7 points per contest. But North Dakota State really doesn't have a ton of great three-point shooting, which has been a little bit of a hallmark for them. Jakari White should be able to help out a little bit, but they just don't compare to what you get with this Creighton team. Having Steve Ashworth now paired alongside of Trey Alexander, they had a combined 37 points night number 1. Ashworth over at Utah State did a good job doling out the ball, shooting over 40% from 3. Got Baylor Shireman, who at 6'7", he's able to give you 6+ rebounds. He's able to shoot nearly 40% from 3. He's able to give you 15+ points per contest, and now you've got depth with Creighton as well. The one thing that was off-putting about this team last season is that they weren't able to go deep in their bench. Isaac Chertout, who comes in from Virginia, someone like a Jonathan Lawson, who comes over from Memphis. These are all guys that are able to elevate. Mason Miller as well, so I do think that that added depth makes Creighton all the more dangerous, and I do think that it allows them to be able to cover this big Mondo number. So this is an ordeal where I did set Creighton as a 23-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay up to 22.5 with them. Did set my total at 143. Got a North Dakota State team that typically they look to play a little bit more defense-oriented and a little bit more slowly, and Creighton I do think is going to be able to tighten up the screws on defense. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be one to lay 22.5 with Creighton. 621, 622 on the betting board. South Alabama, it's the road face-off against Buffalo. Buffalo finds themselves as underdogs of 3.5 points. Your total is ending between 145.5 and 146. I feel like Buffalo should be the favorite here. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with this Buffalo squad. They had a little bit of a rough night number 1 against Fairleigh Dickinson, and this is a team in quite a bit of transition. They did release their coach in the offseason, and now they're going to be looking to build around some younger players like Anquan Bolden Jr. in the backcourt. If that name sounds familiar, yes, that is the son of the famous wide receiver, and I mean the reason why you've got my Twitter handle at @GUnit_81 is because of his father Anquan Bolden, but I do think that he's going to be able to have himself a big season. I think that he's going to be playing a big role out there in the backcourt, but you do have someone that I think is going to be hard to guard for South Alabama in Isaiah Adams. 28 points, 8 boards, 5 assists, night number 1 last season. Was all sorts of versatile. 11.5 points, shot 35.5% from 3 as a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player. And for South Alabama, they lose so many of those good pieces from a season ago. Last year, they were able to make that nice run in the Sun Belt tournament behind the likes of Isaiah Moore. You had Kevin Samuel down low. Owen White was able to be a good, versatile piece for the team, and you pretty much lose each of your top 4 scorers from a season ago. Judah Brown is really having to pick up the load for this team. He was able to look pretty solid night number 1 with 21 points, but overall last year, shot 41% from 3, but 6.5 points per contest. Did not have to have the ball in his hands a ton. Now he's having to be a primary go-to scorer for the team. They bring in Thomas Howells, got some good versatility coming in from UL Monroe, is able to pop some threes, but the South Alabama team didn't have a lot of depth to start with. They're having to replace a lot of pieces for Buffalo. They're sort of in that transitionary period as well, but I do think that with Buffalo, they have brought in a really nice freshman class that's going to be able to elevate this team, and just befuddlingly, South Alabama typically brings in a lot of guys via the transfer portal. Didn't do as much of this offseason. So I did set Buffalo as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. South Alabama, a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. Buffalo, they really look to push tempo. I do think that with late game fouling, this is a game that's going to be pushed over. I set my total at 146.5, so looking at the over, and I am going to be willing to take Buffalo outright as a money line underdog. 623, 624 on the betting board. Utah Tech is on the road facing off against Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State between 3.5 and 4.5 point favorites. Your total between 143.5 and 145. With Jacksonville State, I did set them as favorites of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. With Utah Tech, they've lost 4 out of their top 5 scorers from a season ago. Utah Tech should still have a little bit of rebounding down low. They do bring back Tanner Christensen, guy that's applied about 9 points, 7 boards per contest a season ago on Jacksonville State. Has never really had that one go-to rebounder, so that is going to be a little bit of a trepidation with taking this team, but that said, I do think that with Jacksonville State, they are going to be able to elevate with Travis Roberts coming in and being able to give the team some good production after last year. Wasn't necessarily a primary guy, but did shoot north of 40% from three-point range, and they bring in Xavier transfer Kai Tandy. Kai Tandy saw a few starts last season, just has really been marred by injuries in general. First 2 years at Xavier was averaging about 6.5 points per contest. Really felt like he was becoming a go-to scorer for the team off the ball. Never has really been a great ball handler, but that said, really dealt with injuries the last few years. Him being back at full force, that is absolutely massive. And then you're able to pair that up with a little bit of a versatile big man in Marcellus Brigham, who he didn't take a lot of threes last year, but is a career 45.5% three-point shooter, was able to provide about 5 points, 4 boards. That should be able to allow Jacksonville State to be able to hold up on the glass. And for Utah Tech, you just don't have a lot in the backcourt in general. Noah Gold-Sullivan, he's back from a season ago after he was able to give the team a little bit of versatility. And then you do bring in Tennessee Rainwater via the non-Division I level. He should be able to see him out a little bit down low, but Utah Tech's lifeblood last year was being able to sink threes. They were one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball a season ago. Losing so many of those pieces from a season ago just causes for a bit of a doomsday scenario. So this is a spot where I did set Jacksonville State as a 5-point favorite, one to lay 3.5 to 4 with them. Did set my total 141. Utah Tech, when they entered the Division I level, they were a little bit more up-tempo, but now with losing that three-point shooting and Jacksonville State being a little bit more of a slow and controlled team, I think that Jacksonville State dictates the tempo. So looking at the under and Jacksonville State laying the point. 625, 626 on the betting board. LaSalle is going to be playing us in Northeastern. Northeastern finds themselves as underdogs of between 4.5 and 6 points. Their total is anywhere between 137 to 137.5. When it comes to LaSalle, I did set them as favorites of just 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Northeastern. They've got a lot of talent, and the last few years it has felt that way, but they haven't necessarily been able to put it all together. But I've got massive question marks when it comes to this LaSalle bunch. With LaSalle, team that did lose the Drame brothers from a season ago, I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit of something down low out of Deshaun Shepard. Shepard last year was able to emerge towards the back half of the season. I think that he's going to be able to be a relatively solid rebounder for the team. And under the radar, the gentleman from Lithuania and Rokas, Josias, hopefully I said that correctly, 6'10" big man. He should be able to give a little bit of versatility, and the backcourt isn't bad. Jamari Breakus is a double-figure scorer that's able to give you a few assists. You've got Anwar Gill, a little bit of a glue guy to go along with Khalil Brantley, who last year gave the team about 14 points. Not a prolific three-point shooter, but also someone that's able to give you about 4 assists per contest. But when it comes to Northeastern, it's all about, can you get Lucas Sakota to really play at full force? A former top 250 transfer from Harvard. He had 17 points night number 1. Liked what I saw there. Chris Doherty, when he was fully healthy a few years ago, he was really a difference maker down low. When he had about 9 boards, 12 points per contest last season, dealt with injuries that costed him a bit of the season and forced him to play a little bit more banged up. And then Joe Pridgeon as well. Joe Pridgeon has dealt with so many injuries throughout his career. When he was in the Patriot League during the 2019-20 season as a true freshman, 17 points, 7 boards, shot 43% for 3. If he could get even close to that, you're really staring at something with this Northeastern team. And for LaSalle. I mean, they do have some backcourt presence that is returning, but I do think that down low, Chris Doherty is going to be able to win that battle, and that'll keep Northeastern very snug in this game. Now, a little bit of worry with the fact that Northeastern has been a rough free throw shooting team, which is why I can't take them out right on the money line, but I do think that this is going to be a relatively slow, controlled game. Semi-total 136.5, diving in on the under, and willing to take the points with Northeastern, set them as a 2.5-point underdog. 627, 628 on the betting board. Appalachian State hits the road face-off against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois between 3.5 and 4.5-point underdogs. Your total is between 143 and 143.5. I said Appalachian State as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. This is a good old classic circumstance of a Northern Illinois team that wasn't super duper up-tempo, but they were a little bit more up-tempo last season. Meanwhile, Appalachian State, just under Dustin Kearns, it's been one of the more slow and controlled teams in all of college basketball, and I always like the slow and controlled teams to be able to control the game with some rare circumstances, but I do think that for Appalachian State, with them returning so much talent from a season ago, it's going to be a little bit too much for a Northern Illinois team that they bring back David Coit from last season, a double-figure scorer that saw a lot of minutes towards back half of last season when they were dealing with some injuries in the backcourt. They also do bring in a little bit of an under-the-radar guy in Philman Geberwhite. Geberwhite, he last season was over at DePaul, a part-time starter that was able to give the team about 5.5 points per contest for about 33% three-point shooter, but for Northern Illinois, I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time just guarding all the size and versatility that you've got with Appalachian State. You've got someone in Justin Abson, whose last season was very solid down low. He had 12 rebounds in the team's season debut. Now, don't think that that's going to be long-lasting, but last year, he was able to give the team about 6 boards, 6.5 points, a little bit over 2 blocks per contest. He's a really good low-post presence. And then Donovan Gregory at 6'5", double-figure scorer from a season ago. Not a great three-point shooter, but a respectable three-point shooter that just makes winning plays in general for this team. And Appalachian State has done a really nice job of bringing in some non-D1 talent this year. They unearthed Trevon Spillers, who ranked number 1, 16 points, 7 boards after last season. He was at the non-Division 1 level. Couple that with Christopher Mantis. He was a very big part of the team last year. Shot 36% per three, 6'7", a little bit of a combo player. And for Northern Illinois, the top flight guards for this team, relatively solid. You also have a guy in Zariq Nutter who's able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, but the overall depth is just not there. And I do think that Appalachian State gets their slower, more grimy style and is able to control this game. So that Appalachian State as a 5-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay 3.5 to 4 with them. Did set my total 135 as well. Appalachian State, ever since Dustin Kearns has taken over, it's been one of the slower teams in all of college basketball. And even though Northern Illinois saw an uptick in scoring last season, they were still one of the more miserable teams in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis as well. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Appalachian State. 629, 630 on the betting board. Campbell hits the road to face off against East Carolina. East Carolina, a 12.5-point underdog. Total is 135 with East Carolina. Set them as an 8.5-point favorite, so I am going to be willing to take the points with Campbell. Do have my concerns with them losing Joshua Lucane. He was a big part of this team from the season ago. They are stepping up to the Coastal Conference, but Campbell always has that distinct style of playing really slow, being able to play some pretty rock-solid defense, and they have dealt with quite a few injuries over the last few seasons, and now they get back some of those guys in the fold, as you got Menos Makasis. Hopefully I said that correctly. He had 16 points, 3 assists in the season opener against Navy, a game in which Campbell pulled off 59-48, one of the biggest eyesores of a game that you saw just really in that opening week or so of the season. They also bring in Nolan Dorsey, and I think that this guy is going to be a difference maker coming over from the Patriot League. Did not play night number 1, so we're going to need to check in on his status, but 6 points, 2.5 assists, just a nice overall glue guy that at 6'5" was a mid-33-point shooter. Sort of thinking that he might be out of the fold once again, but someone that can be able to elevate the team. But you know that Anthony Talloroso is going to be out there in the fold, as he a season ago was able to do a nice job in the backcourt, give the team 6 boards, a pair of assists, 12.5 points. Just a lot of guys with a lot of versatility. Meanwhile, you've got an East Carolina team that they themselves are dealing with a few two-time transfers that have yet to be able to get out there on the floor. Nolan Dorsey is one for Campbell, and then you take a look at the flip side, and I don't think we're going to be seeing Cam Hayes this season for East Carolina. Now, they do bring back R.J. Felton. Felton is someone that a season ago, he was really one of the few guys that didn't get injured for East Carolina. Big reason why he was able to average right around 14 points per game. And then you've got Azar Osar, who was last season able to do a nice job with about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but East Carolina does have a little bit of a lack of three-point shooting. They do elevate themselves with Bobby Pettiford coming over from Kansas after he was a top 150 recruit, but really didn't see a lot around night number one. I don't know if he's just not picking up the system or what, but that was a little bit strange to see. And then you do have Brandon Johnson, who should be able to win the battle down low with about 8 rebounds per game a season ago, and he's someone that at 6'8" is able to pop some threes, but with East Carolina, I do think that they're going to be able to win this game, but I think that Campbell is just going to sort of get them in their vector, make this game be very, very slow, very controlled. East Carolina feels like they want to run just a little bit more this year, and I don't think that Campbell can allow them to do so. So I did set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Fighting Camels, and when it comes to this total, did set mine at a 132.5, so I'm diving under to go along with the points. 631, 632 on the betting board. St. Bonaventure is going to be playing us Canisius. Canisius is an underdog between 12.5 and 14 points. Total is between 141 and 141.5 with the Bonnies. Set them as just 7.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Canisius. I actually liked what I saw from them in a losing effort against Syracuse a few days ago. When it comes to this Bonnies bunch, they bring back right around 90% of their scoring from season ago. After 2 seasons ago, they lost pretty much everything, and that was relatively brutal. And also do keep in mind, Canisius was able to pull off the upset in this game between these two a season ago, so there's going to be a little bit of revenge factor. Guy that was not in that game, Charles Pride, I did think that he's going to be a nice elevator for the St. Bonaventure backcourt. At 21 points in the season opener against Longwood last season, 14.5 points on 37% three-point shooting at Bryant, but you have to like what you're able to get in terms of the versatility. You've got out there Asa Mavis. He's able to be at 6'6", a really nice, versatile player. Now, I will say, this is a guy that went by like a different name a season ago. I'm trying to remember what it exactly was. So, he had a little bit of a name change when it comes to St. Bonaventure, but I feel like his overall game, Mike Adams Woods comes over from Cincinnati. He's able to be a double-figure scorer. That's able to give you a little bit of facilitation as well, but for Canisius, I do think that bringing back a lot of the pieces from the backcourt a season ago, including Taj Savosky, that's really going to be able to help this team out. They look a little bit better down low after Bryce Oakpo last season was able to supply about 6 rebounds per game. You got Frank Mitchell, who's a guy that was at the non-D1 level a season ago. He elevates up, and he looked very good for this team to begin the season, and I just don't think that this is going to be a St. Bonaventure team that's necessarily going to be able to just plow and dominate on the glass. And then even though Jakob Fritz is now gone for Canisius, his brother and Yuri Fritz, he's a 6'9" gentleman that comes up from the Netherlands. He's another good, versatile player for this Canisius bunch. So I did set this line at 10.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Canisius. With Canisius, they played very up-tempo against Syracuse. I do think that St. Bonaventure going to get back to their roots, play some more defense, did as a result at semi-total at 136.5, so diving in on the under and diving in on the points with Canisius. 633, 634 on the betting board. UT Martin, they're on the road. They're facing off against Mississippi State. Mississippi State between 22 and 23-point favorites. Totals between 142.5 and 143.5. I did set Mississippi State as 23-point favorites, so between about 22, 22.5. I don't want to lay anything more with Mississippi State, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. Tolu Smith being out for Mississippi State hurts his team a little bit on defense. They didn't need him night number one. I think that might have been a little bit more of an indictment that Arizona State was overrated by myself and others coming into the season, but that was a less than terrific performance by the Sun Devils. But Mississippi State, who was 363rd out of 363 D1 teams a season ago in three-point shooting, they get elevated by the fact that they bring in Trey Fort, one of the best junior college transfers in all of college basketball. He had a double-figure points in night number one against Arizona State, hit some big threes. You're bringing Andrew Taylor as well, 20-point per game score over at Marshall a season ago. That should be really able to help out this team. And then for UT Martin, this team was pretty ghastly with their defense. They were outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and they are going to get pummeled on the glass because even though you do have Tolu Smith out of the fold, you still have guys like DJ Jeffries and company that I think are going to be able to do a nice job down low. And for this UT Martin team, you got to be wondering what you're going to be able to get outside of Justice Jackson. Justice Jackson comes in after he was a relatively seldom used guy over at Hawaii a season ago, a okay three-point shooter, but he came in immediately. He was able to put in there a double-figure amount of points night number one, but you have to be wondering what you're going to be able to get outside that because this team was really built last season around stud guard play. Parker Stewart was able to log about 16 points per contest. They do have Jordan Sears back at the fold, and that is massive. He was one of the main facilitators last year with right around 3 assists per contest, but the loss of KJ Simon, who was a very solid player that just did it all for the team, a block, a steal, 15 points per contest. That really does set this UT Martin team behind the 8 ball. Going up against a Mississippi State team that they were in the top 10 last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and even with Tolu Smith out of the fold, you saw it against Arizona State. This team is still one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. They've got great depth. You've got question marks with regards to what you're going to be able to get out of guys like Cameron Matthews from a scoring perspective, but you know that Mississippi State is going to be able to bring it on the defensive side of things, and they do look improved on offense. I did set my total more around a 141. This was an up-tempo UT Martin team, so I think that Mississippi State gets their points. I just don't think that UT Martin is able to do their part with regards to being able to provide their end to be able to get this total over, and so Mississippi State is a 23-point favorite, so going to be one to lay up to 22.5 with Mississippi State, and looking at anything north of 141 under. 635, 636 on the betting board. Seattle is playing us to Montana State. Montana State, an underdog of 11.5 to 12 points. And your total is between 141.5 and 143. And with Montana State, very much a new look team after Danny Sprinkle leaves for Utah State a season ago. And I do think that they're up against it. I did set my line at 9.5. I think it might be a little bit too demonstrative, as with Montana State, they did do a nice job of being able to retain a few pieces from a season ago. When you do lose guys like Raekwon Battle and company, it is hard to be able to build yourself up from that, but you know what? They are going up against a bunch here in Seattle that they've got Cam Tyson, and got to be questioning what you get outside of Cam Tyson, as he was a guy that was able to put in there darn near 20 points per contest last season, and there's lots of versatility outside of him. You've got someone like a Brandon Chartfield. He was able to log right around about 7 to 8 points per contest. He's able to give you 5 boards. At 6'8", he's able to pop threes. You've got someone like Kobe Williamson, who's able to give you a block per contest. Alex Schumacher, got to be looking at him in the backcourt as well. But there's just a lot of men of mystery outside of Cam Tyson. Meanwhile, for Montana State, the one big thing that they did retain was Robert Ford III. You go back to when he was at Idaho State during the 2021-22 season. Season was cut short due to injury, but he was logging about 11 points, 4.5 boards, shot 40% from three-point range. Was a bit of an afterthought for Montana State a season ago, but I really think that he's going to be able to elevate his way upward. You also have a just bunch in general that I think should be relatively scrappy on the glass. You don't have that one star-studded rebounder, Brian Goraki. He comes in as a non-Division I transfer. I do think that he's going to be able to have some success right away, but I also do take a look at Tyler Patterson being potentially an X-factor for the team. At 6'8", I think that he needs to elevate a little bit more on the glass. He has never averaged more than 2 rebounds per game, but take a look at what he's been able to do the last 2 seasons. Been able to shoot about 36% from three-point range. I do think that there's room for his game to be able to grow. On top of that, they do have Patrick McMahon in the fold as well. Patrick McMahon, last season, he was a pretty nice priority reserve that was able to give the team about 4.5 points. Did shoot 50% from three, career 39% three-point shooter. I do think that that's the way that Montana State is going to be operating, with Eddie Turner III giving out the ball quite a bit after he spent the beginning part of his career at Columbia. Was a solid player, just could never stay out there on the floor due to injury, so they're trying to buy low there. And with Seattle, this is a team that does a solid job on defense. Seattle's a little bit more of an up-tempo team, but they are consistently top 75 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. With Montana State, I think that they're going to be a relatively mid-tempo team as well. You saw Seattle give up just 60 points, night number 1 against Prairie View. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring slog, so going to be taking a look at the under. Set my total at 141.5, so here to 143, diving under. But with this Seattle team, I feel like double digits is a little bit too lofty for them. Going to take the points with Montana State to go along with that under. 637, 638 on the betting board. Providence plays host to UW Milwaukee. The Panthers are between 16.5 and 17-point road underdogs, and your total between a 150.5 and 152.5. With UW Milwaukee, felt like they should have been closer to 12.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to take those points. We were talking about this a little bit before with Mike Randle, and I like this UW Milwaukee team. They are very well coached under Bart Lundy. I do think that the fact that he has brought in so many guys that just are able to play their role. UW Milwaukee was about an 8 or 9 deep team a season ago. While they did lose a few of those pieces from a season ago, I still think that this team is going to be able to do very solid work with Kentrell Pullen, who's pulling in buckets. Last season was a starter for the bunch with 10.5 points, 4.5 boards, shot about 39% from three-point range. Absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table for this team. And then They bring in a nice transfer to be able to elevate in Angelo Stewart. Stewart, last season, he was a little bit more glued to the bench, was a little bit more of a priority reserve, began his career at Seattle. I do like the overall outlook of him. You also have, on top of that, someone in Mr. Browning, who is able to do a good job of being able to dole out the ball. Marketh Browning II, last season, he was able to be a nice facilitator. You do want to be checking in on BJ Freeman, though. Freeman did not play in the season opener, and that is something that is a little bit of a concern. I do think that Freeman should be able to go in this one, but that is something that I am monitoring because he was Mr. Do It All in conference play, averaging north of 18 points per contest, overall more like 16 points per game last season. And then on the flip side, Providence, they're going to have the best player on the floor, Bryce Hopkins. Honestly, I think has All-American potential. He had a double-double to begin the season against Columbia last year, shot 36% from three. He's able to give you some good rebounding at 6'7", 16 points per contest, a block, a steal per game. And then you have the guys that come over along with Cam English. Devontae Gaines is a big one of them. He's not necessarily the most prolific scorer, but he'll give you some rebounds. He'll do a good job on the defensive side of things. Do have to question Joshua Drew making the jump up from the A10 level as last season. He was able to give the team about 15.5 points per game, and at 6'9", he pops threes, but last two seasons shot below 30% from three-point range. Honestly, probably want him to be a little bit more in the post because he's got plenty of versatility with someone like Devin Carter. Bryce Hopkins, he's really able to put the defense out of sorts as well. And then guys like Corey Floyd Jr., a little bit more of a gamble as to what you're going to be able to get out of them. I like this Providence team, but there are some moving parts, and UW Milwaukee, it retains most of the guys that they had a season ago. I do think the Providence is going to be playing at a little bit more of a middle tempo. UW Milwaukee really did crank up their tempo a season ago. They were a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game. I think they dial it back just a scotch here. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I set my total at a 146.5, and with north of 13 being the number on this game right now, seeing about 16.5 to 17. Well, let's take the points with UW Milwaukee, set them as a 12.5 point underdog. 639, 640 on the betting board. Cleveland State plays those to Ohio. The Bobcats of Ohio between 1 and 1.5 point underdogs. Totals between 150 and 151. I actually made Ohio the favorite in this game. I feel like they should be -3. So I'm going to be taking a look at Ohio outright on the money line. It's Bobcats team that I think is just so well coached. We were talking about coaching in the last segment with one of our good friends in Mike Randle, and Jeff Bowles is a guy that I really do trust in. He's got himself someone in Gabe Witznitzer, who I think is going to be able to lift his team down low. 6'11" big man that began his career at Louisville, was a little bit more of an afterthought last season, but with having now Dwight Wilson and company out of the fold, I do think that he's going to need to elevate. But with Ohio, you know that you're setting the backcourt. You've got your main facilitator in Jalen Hunter back from a season ago, along with the Browns. A.J. Brown was someone that was able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range, was able to give you right around a double-figure amount of points per game. And then you got good production out of Miles Brown, who last season shot 44.5% from three-point range, right around 10 points per contest. The rebounding might be a little bit more of a question mark outside of Witznitzer, but you've got a Cleveland State team that they themselves have some question marks with regards to how they're going to be able to hit the glass as well. I do like Tristan Iranura. He did it all for this Cleveland State team a season ago. Aside from shoot threes, he's never been a good three-point shooter, but 15.5 points, 6.5 boards, a block, a steal, and that's exactly what you need from one of your main floor generals. Jason Woodrich is someone I do think is going to be able to elevate as well. Last year, was able to give the team about 6 points, a mid-33 point shooter, which was good for this Cleveland State team. Cleveland State was very good at being able to force turnovers on the road a season ago. They've got 29 steals in their first two games of the season. One of those games did come against Duquesne, where they gave Duquesne a very good run for their money, so I like what I'm seeing there. That said, Tevin Smith is right now one of their main rebounders, comes in as a 6'4" gentleman from Denver that was solid at Denver, was a double-figure scorer. Not necessarily lauded for his rebounding, though, so I do think that Witznitzer going to be able to win that battle down low. With Ohio, you've got good versatility, and with Ohio, I do think that this defense going to be much better than it was a season ago when they were outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They were able to take it to Troy night number one. You do have a Cleveland State team that perennially decides to scale it back with regards to their tempo. They were well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game last season, so I do think that this game is going to be slowed down. So I might tell 143, diving in on the under, but I think that the wrong team is favored. I said Ohio at -3, so I'm going to add Ohio outright on the money line, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under 641, 642 on the betting board. Toledo is going to be playing us to Louisiana. Louisiana is a 6 point underdog. Your total, that is anywhere between 152.5 and 153.5. In terms of the total, I set mine at a 153. So seeing the 152.5 out there, it's a max I'm going to be willing to go over on, but I'm going to be willing to go over. But with Toledo, I did make them a 7-point favorite. With Toledo, lots of moving parts. You lose Ray J. Dennis from a season ago. Pretty much 4 out of your top 6 scorers from a season ago, as a matter of fact. They are all out of the fold, but Toledo did not skip a beat night number 1, completely bounded Detroit, and this Toledo team does a really good job of being able to develop from within, and Raheem Moss looks like he's going to be that guy. 15 points, 8 boards, 5 assists in that season opener against Detroit. It's been a little bit of an understudy last few seasons. Dante Maddox is really the top of their returning scores from a season ago. Shot 45% from 3, 11.5 points per game. Does play a little bit more off the ball, and with the way that Moss is able to facilitate offense, I think that that's going to be remaining a constant. And you've got Tyler Cochran now back in the fold after he was limited to just 9 games a season ago. If you go back to what he was able to do during the 2021-22 campaign at Northern Illinois, 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, just a stat sheet suffer, lone question mark. Can he stay healthy for a year, as he's had a few injuries over the last few seasons? Meanwhile, for Louisiana, Themis Folks, he was able to log right around 6 assists per contest last season. He's picking up right where he left off, but this team does lose a lot down low. Jordan Brown, he was able to actually pop a few threes when needed, but was just such a good rim protector. Now pretty much the only guy north of 6'6" said is going to see meaningful minutes is Joe Charles. He did have 10 rebounds in that season opening win against Youngstown State, but with Louisiana, got to be wondering how they're going to be able to operate down low. You don't necessarily have a lot of versatility there, and the depth just is not there as well. You're going to need Kentrell Garnett, who has shot north of 41% from 3 the last 2 years, to really be able to elevate because he's been a little bit of a lower usage guy. You've got Kobe Julian, who has been dealing with injuries throughout the entirety of his career as well. He's just never been able to stay out there on the floor for the entirety of a season. Last year had just 4 points per contest after the season before. Was actually very good. He had like 13 points, 4 boards, shot 35% from 3, so there's some upside there. But with Toledo, I feel like you're getting more of a trusted product, and I do think that Toledo, though they don't have a lot of size down low, because Louisiana does lose Jordan Brown, they're going to be out of sorts in the post. So I did set Toledo as a 7-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number in at a 152.5 or less. Looking at this total over. Now we have my DK Network right to pick. 643, 644 on the betting board. We will look to stay away from Youngstown State on this one. You got Fresno State, and they're facing off against Kent State. Golden Flashes opened up as 2-point favorites. Now we're seeing mostly 2.5s. I'm seeing a few straight 3s, but mostly seeing them laying 2.5 points. Totals anywhere between 140.5 and 142. Right up is on Kent State. I set them as 11.5 point favorites. Kent State had their souls crushed in that loss against James Madison. You do have to be wondering a little bit about the psyche of the team, but I think that they're going to be able to bounce back, and they're going to be able to bounce back in force with Kent State. They were able to make the NCAA tournament last year. They do lose some key cogs from last year, but you pretty much have 4 rotation pieces returning, and you've got Chris Payton back, who in that loss that we did see against James Madison, it wasn't because of him. He had 22 points, a trio of blocks, 15 rebounds, and if you look at what Chris Payton did towards the beginning of the season last year to the end, just not the same player. Began his career at Pittsburgh in the final 17 games of the year, 11.5 points, 6.5 boards, 1.6 blocks per game after averaging 2.1 points and 2.4 rebounds per game the first 17 games of the season. So he and Solron Hornbeek should be able to work in tandem. You've got Jalen Solinger along Giovanni Santiago, a pair of guys that can really light it up from 3-point range. Last season, Solinger shot north of 40% from 3-point range. Santiago hasn't been as much of a facilitator throughout his career. He's going to need to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, but he shot about 38% from 3 last season as well. And Fresno State had a very, very interesting game to begin the season against Fresno Pacific. That is a non-D1 team. They were up only about 4 points with about $120 remaining. Fresno State had to get out there with their lives, and Fresno State last season, they were in the bottom 30 in all of college basketball. Actually, check that, bottom 40 in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, for 328th overall, and they don't return a single guy that shot north of 30.3% from 3-point range. Now, I do like Eduardo Andre down low. When he was actually given starts last year, this guy was dominant, and in night number 1, 4 blocks, 17 points, 9 rebounds. That's actually one thing that you're able to feel very good about with Fresno, and they do also bring back Isaiah Hill. Hill last season was able to supply about 12.5 points per contest, and he was that guy that shot 30.3% from three-point range. But for Fresno State, just a lot of disjointed offense. They play very slowly. They don't turn the ball over a ton, going up against a Kent State team that they were 19th in the country last year in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They were 20th in the country in terms of just overall points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that they are going to be like an anaconda and just suck the life out of this Fresno State offense. We see that happen time and time again. Fresno State has to travel from west to the great Midwest as well. That is going to be taking a little bit out of them, and have to be questioning the depth with this team as well. Xavier DeSalle coming over from Wyoming is something that is encouraging for Fresno State, but also with this Kent State team, they've been able to do a nice job of being able to stock up and be able to help out that backcourt via the transfer portal, bringing in Reggie Bass, who last season averaged double figures at Central Michigan. So I do think that Kent State going to be able to take full control of this game. My DK Network right to pick is Kent State laying the number. I set them as 11.5 point favorites. I just don't see why this is on a neutral court game, actually graded as Fresno State. If you award 3 points to home court, they would be technically the favorite. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So going to be taking Kent State with my DK Network right to pick. Did set my total at 137.5 as well. Fresno State, as I alluded to, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, and Kent State very sure-handed on defense. So looking at the under and my DK Network right to pick, that is on Kent State laying the points. 645, 646 on the betting board. St. Louis is playing us to Illinois State. Illinois State, an underdog of between 8 and 8.5 points, seeing a series 7.5 out there as well. Your total between 144.5 and 146. And when it comes to St. Louis, I did set them as favorites of 11 points. I am going to be willing to lay this number. With St. Louis, you do have some question marks when it comes to the backcourt, and Travis Ford, I do think that we need to be calling into question his coaching just a touch as well. But that said, I do think that they should be able to take it to an Illinois State team that they just feel like a team without a captain, as well as for Illinois State has been very rough for them last few years. Malachi Poindexter comes in from the ACC, and I fully expect him to be a double-figure scorer this year. And I did like the pickup of Miles Foster. Foster was over at Monmouth last year, did a nice job stuffing the stat sheet, 12.5 points, 6.5 boards. One thing that he doesn't do is really stretch a floor at 6'7", but for Illinois State, I do think that there's going to be a lot of deficiencies down low because he's really your main low post presence, and you don't have a lot of size with this team. Meanwhile, for St. Louis, while they do lose guys like Francis Okoro and company, Terrence Hargrove Jr., I think is going to be able to control things down low. A little bit of an undersized 6'5" big man that last year had about 4 rebounds per game. I do think that he's going to be able to elevate. We saw during the 2020-21 season, he was north of a 40% three-point shooter, has been in this program for quite a bit. And you've also got Mikey Meadows being able to dole out the ball. With Michael Meadows, he comes over from Portland, where he was able to do a nice job giving out about 2.5, 3 assists per contest. Spent a lot of time with Shante Leggins. He has been able to be a very good facilitator to begin the season. 7 assists and 2 turnovers in the first 2 games of the campaign, a proven scorer. On top of that, you've got Gibson Jimerson, who off the ball is capable of shooting north of 40% from 3, and I was alluding to the low post play of Illinois State. Tim Dulger coming over from Tulsa, I think is big. He was a starter last year that supplied about 5.5 rebounds per game at 6'7", has a little bit of versatility, not going to go out there and shoot a bunch of threes, but for St. Louis, I like the way that they've been able to restock the roster, and for Illinois State, just feels like a bunch of misfit pieces with Dalton Bakes trying to control things at the point guard spot. I did set St. Louis as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Did set my total at 143. I do think that St. Louis, after they were just horrible on defense last year, I think that they are going to recognize their folly, and they are going to be able to bulk up just a little bit on the defensive side of things. So going to be taking a look at this total under and laying with St. Louis. 647, 648 on the betting board. Richmond plays host to Siena. The Itsy Bitsy Spiders find themselves as favorites of 12 to 11.5 points. Your total is anywhere between 143 to 143.5. With this total, I did set mine more around a 134.5, so I'm going to be certainly taking a look at the under, and with Richmond, I can only make them an 8.5 point favorite. Siena has a lot of moving parts, and Michael Ealy, it looks like, is going to be out of the fold, not just for this game, but over the next few weeks. Was one of the more touted guys coming in for Siena this season, but I still think that they're going to be able to be very solid, as well as you've got Zach Tekin, who comes in as little bit of an unheralded sophomore, was playing originally at Turkey, saw some minutes towards back half of the season last year, and I do think that he's going to be able to elevate it. I don't think that he's going to be as much of a primary scorer. He did put in 16 points, night number 1, but where I think he's really going to be able to help out the team is by facilitating, as they do bring in someone in Michael Ojo, who is a very underrated freshman at 6'7" that a lot of people are raving about. He was out there in the Virginia area. On top of that, you're bringing Giovanni Amajuru. He was actually from England. He was seldom used over at Sam. He used to say the season ago. He looked very good night number 1, being able to give the team 11 points. And this is a Siena team that under Coach Carmen has been able to do a very solid job of just being able to get the most out of their guys. In Richmond, under Chris Moody, he does a very good job of being able to coach up this team. Have to question the sustainability of Jordan King putting in their 34 points night number 1 to really get this team off the hook and get them a win over VMI. He was a solid scorer at ETSU 2 seasons ago at East Tennessee State. Did shoot north of 40% from 3 last year, more around 31.5% from 3-point range, but you're going to need to get a little bit more out of the likes of Jelani Hunt, Jason Roche, and company. But the guy that I really look at is 7-foot Neil Quinn. This guy has good versatility, as last season he doled out 3 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 9.5 points per game. At 7 feet tall, he's capable of popping threes. Didn't pop them well last year, but he's capable of being able to shoot some threes. I do have some question marks with regards to the overall depth of Richmond. Isaac Bigelow, he's able to give you a few rebounds, but I do think that Siena going to be able to hold in this game. It's a new look Siena team, but this is really a play in which I trust in Coach Carmen and what he's been able to do over there at Siena. So this is an ordeal where I'm going to be taking a look at Siena catching the points. I set them more as an 8.5 point underdog. And Siena, they play very good defense, typically on offense, leave a little bit of something to be desired. I think that is fully going to be the case this year. So diving in on the under and taking the points with Siena. 649, 650 on the betting board. North Texas is playing us to Omaha. Nebraska of Omaha is an underdog of 14.5 to 15 points. And your total on this game, you're finding it anywhere between 138.5 and 139.5. With Omaha, did set them as an underdog of 17.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with North Texas. North Texas looks like they're going to be playing a little bit more up-tempo this year than they did last season, but there's no place to go but up, as last season they played a full possession per game slower than anyone else in all of college basketball. And I do think that for North Texas, even though they do lose Tyler Perry and so many of those guys that were able to be solid down low, you are really looking at something in Mule Sissoko. In night number 1 for Sissoko, he did not score a single point, but he logged 7 rebounds. And if you look at those last 3 games in the NIT, he had a combined 30 rebounds against Oklahoma State, Wisconsin, and UAB. So this guy's able to bang down low. You've got Aaron Scott along with Reuben Jones, pair of proven scorers from a season ago, and they bring in CJ Nolan, someone that was over at Oklahoma a season ago. He was able to put in there a double-figure amount of points night number 1. So I do like this blend that North Texas has going. And for Omaha, they are a little bit improved from last season. You've got Frankie Fiddler, who was a double-figure scorer last year that's able to log about 4 or so rebounds per game. Markel Sutton down low at about 5 boards last season, but his team really lacks a lot of 3-point shooting. You're going to be really relying upon J.J. White to be able to dole out the ball after last season. Gave out 4 assists per game, but Omaha, over the last 3 seasons, they have been a bottom 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They led off the season shooting about 30% from 3 against TCU, which honestly, there's no shame in whatsoever. TCU is a very good lockdown defense, so I don't read too much into that, but I do think that for Omaha, they're really going to be up against it. I don't think that they have anyone that's going to be able to match up with Sissoko, and I do think that North Texas style, even though Grant McCaslin is out of the fold, they stayed relatively in-house with this one. They're still going to be playing slow, controlled, semi-total at a 133.5, so I'm going to be diving in on the under. Omaha, also not very much of an up-tempo team themselves, and with North Texas, want to lay up to 17 with them. 651, 652 on the betting board. It is Eastern Illinois, and they hit the road face-off against Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago between 18 and 18.5 point favorites, 137.5 to 138.5 is your total, and with Eastern Illinois, set them as 17-point underdogs. I am going to be willing to take the points. This is just a ordeal where I'm just not as bullish on Loyola Chicago as many people are coming into the year. I know that a lot of people are expecting a bounce back for Loyola Chicago, and I don't think they're going to be as terrible as they were a season ago. And losing to Florida Atlantic, certainly no shame in that, but the turnovers for Loyola Chicago, that's really where they need to clean things up, and they turned the ball over a ton against FAU a few nights ago. They do have Philip Allison back in the fold. He was their top scorer from season ago. He was able to shoot 40% for 3, 14 14.5 points per game. Braden Norris is a guy that's able to dole it out as well, but they do have quite a few moving parts. They bring in Patrick Mwamba, who is a solid, versatile player at Oral Roberts, but wasn't necessarily the man. You've got someone in Desmond Watson, who he comes over from Davidson, and he had 9.5 points, 4 boards, shot 27.5% from 3. I had no idea if he was a fit for this team. Greg Dolan was solid in that Cornell style, but now he has to play a little bit more of a slower tempo, and it does feel like there's a lot of guys that just don't fit this Loyola Chicago system. Meanwhile, for Eastern Illinois, it's not out about it. It's a team that is rough, but if Dan Lures can get back to what he was 2 seasons ago, where he shot, I'm not even kidding here, north of 52% from 3, he shot 44% from distance first 2 games of the season, you're staring at something here. They do have a guy down low in Sincere Malone, who stands right around 6'8" last season. He was able to give the team about 5 boards, 2 steals per game. He's actually one of the better players with regards to steals per minute a season ago. And then they do also bring in an Illinois transfer in Jermaine Hamlin. He was a little bit glued to the bench last season, began his career with a Fighting Illini. He has looked relatively solid in the post as well at 6'10". So I do think that Eastern Illinois is staring at something, and with having someone like a Malone that's able to take away the ball, I think that Eastern Illinois surprisingly might be a tad bit of a strange matchup for Loyola Chicago. I think Loyola Chicago certainly is the better team. They should be able to win this game, and they should be able to win this game quite handily. But that said, laying this big of a number, it's something that I'm just not going to be willing to do. I am going to be willing to take the points with Eastern Illinois. I did set them as an underdog of more like 17 points, so I'm going to be diving in on those points. Set my total at 133, so going to be going with the under. I do think that Loyola Chicago is getting back to basics, and basics for them is playing good, sound defense. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Eastern Illinois. 653, 654 on the betting board. It is Bradley, and Bradley plays host to Utah State. Utah State is between a 5 to a 5.5 point underdog, and your total that is between 136.5 and 137. I am with our good friend in Mike, and I am going to be willing to lay the number with Bradley. I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to go up to 6 here with Bradley. They do lose rink mass from a season ago, but they do retain a lot of that good backcourt that we saw a season ago, and we go up against a Utah State team that's just in all sorts of disarray because they bring in Danny Sprinkle. Sprinkle was able to bring with them a few guys from Montana State, like a great Osabor, who did have 9 rebounds to lead off the season against their non-D1 opponent, but with Utah State, it does feel like there's a lot of just hodgepodge pieces that were put together, to say the least. They do have a guy that comes over from Coastal Carolina, Josh Uduje, who last season he was able to put in there about 13.5 points per contest. He should play in tandem with Darius Brown II, who isn't necessarily a demonstrative scorer, but is someone that is able to shoot in the high 30s, low 40s from three-point range, does a good job of being able to find guys in space. And for Bradley, you do have a guy like that in Mr. Darius Hannah. Darius Hannah, I think, has really good versatility. At 6'9" last season, he was able to do a nice job with about 5.5 points, 3.5 boards. He had 5 assists in that season-opening win over UAB. I think that they're going to be looking at him to be sort of that guy that does a little bit of everything, not going to be that demonstrative big-time scorer or anything like that, but someone that can have the ball in his hands to be able to take the pressure off of Duke Dean in the backcourt. Duke Dean at 5'8". I mean, this guy, nice little warrior that shot 36% from 3, 9.5 points, 3 assists per contest, and it's very good on the defensive side of things, and that's where really Bradley makes their hay. They were last season a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and even though Rick Mass is out of the fold, you've got 6'9" Malevi Leons, who he last year shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, so able to give you about 6 boards, a block, a steal, a double-figure amount of points. I like what he's able to bring to the table. Utah State with Osabor, I don't think is going to be able to match up down low, and I do think that Bradley going to be able to defend that home floor. I am with Mike on this one. I did set Bradley as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Did set my total 138.5. Utah State, I think they're going to be taking on that Danny Sprinkle style of playing a little bit more mid-tempo, and I do think that the defense is going to be a bit of a work in progress for them. So I am going to be diving in on this total over, set my total 138.5, and I'm willing to lay it with Bradley. 655, 656 on the betting board. Wyoming is playing against Cal Poly, and Cal Poly finds themselves as underdogs of anywhere between 13.5 to 14.5 points. Totals between 135.5 and 136.5. This just reads as one of those classic games where Cal Poly loses, but they hang within like 1 to 2 points of the spread. We saw that a lot last year with this Cal Poly team, and I'm sort of banking on it this time as well. I did set Wyoming as a 13-point favorite. Always have to be mindful of that Wyoming elevation, and it certainly does take it out of a lot of opponents, and I do think that Cal Poly is going to have a little bit of a difficult time with it, but I just have a tough time laying this number with Wyoming. A lot of new pieces from last year. They brought in a ton of guys via the transfer portal a season ago that did not work. We will see if Jeff Linder, who I genuinely think is a good coach, is able to get these pieces online this year. It's Brandon Wetzel. He's one of their main guys returning from last year. Shot 40% for 3, 8 points, 4 boards per contest. He's able to be a solid player, but they brought in a lot of guys from the non-division level, from the junior college level that they're going to need to try to play in tandem. They do bring in Sam Griffin, who he was a proven scorer over at Tulsa. 15 points per contest on a Tulsa team that, I mean, they were the worst cover team that I have ever seen. They went and covered 4 out of 30 plus games. It was absolutely incredible, but I mean, he was a good scorer for them. They've got down low someone at Cam Manyawu, who comes in as a true freshman, 6'9", had 10 rebounds in the team season opener. But for Cal Poly, they do bring back Kobe Sanders. Kobe Sanders has never been a lighted up big time scorer or anything like that, but has always been a nice glue guy for this team. Last year, his average like 7 points, 2 assists, a steal. Doesn't shoot it well from 3-point range, but just stuff the stat sheet. And I do think that bringing in Cal transfer Jared Hyder is going to be able to help out as well. He could never really find his footing over at Cal, but if you go back to his Fresno State game days, he was able to give you 9 points, 3 assists. At the Mountain West level, he was honestly a pretty solid guard, and that's much better than the level of talent that Cal Poly has had in recent years. Cal Poly doesn't really have a ton down low, but neither does Wyoming in my opinion, and I think that Wyoming wins this game, but I think that it's going to be a yucky, slow game. Cal Poly, year in and year out, one of the slowest teams in terms of total possessions per game. Wyoming has not really played up-tempo under Linder either, so I did set my total at 129. I'm diving in on the under. With Cal Poly getting north of 13, I'm going to be willing to take those points. 657, 658 on the betting board. It is Long Beach State. They hit the road to face off against DePaul. DePaul finds themselves in a rather pick'em game there between a pick'em to a 1-point underdog, and your total is between 154.5 and 155. I set Long Beach State as a 1.5 point favorite. At a 1, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I don't want to lay anything more than 1, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 1, and I'm going to be taking a look at the over because DePaul, they showed night number 1 against Purdue Fort Wayne that they are very unwilling to play defense, and it's a DePaul bunch that is right now dealing with a bunch of injuries. Mac Etienne, a former top 75 recruit, he's currently dealing with a little bit of an injury. Now, you do have Jalen Terry, who last season was able to give you only about 6 points per contest, but him being out is also a big deal as well. I thought that he'd be able to do a lot more with this offense as well, and until he's into the fold, you're not going to be seeing a ton of elevation in terms of this DePaul team as well. Now, they do have Deshaun Nelson, a guy that in conference was averaging a double-figure amount of points, 5 boards at 6'8". He's able to shoot it relatively well from 3-point range. And then I do like the prospect in Durame Karama. Was unable to take the floor night number 1. Should be good to go in this one. I know that he's a little bit more of an international true freshman, but I mean, it's a DePaul team that they're dealing with not having a full allotment of guys. Meanwhile, for Long Beach State, you do have yourself the Trayers, and Abadur Trayer, who's a little bit more of a back-to-the-basket, low-post guy who's able to give you about 16 points last season, was able to chip in there about 8 boards per contest, but was capable of shooting threes. And then Siena Trayer was able to give you about 13 points. He was able to chip in there 10.5 boards per game as well. So, I mean, both of these guys work in tandem very well. I think that they were like the lone pair of guys outside the Power Conference level that both average 8+ rebounds per game. Between the two of them, you've got a Long Beach State team that as well. They do have a bit of transition in the backcourt, but they bring back Marcus Siones. Siones has been very inconsistent throughout his career with his 3-point shooting. 2 seasons ago, shot 37% from 3. Last year, shot 26% from 3. I do think that he's going to be able to bounce back just a little bit this season, but on top of that, they bring in Messiah Thompson, who over at Alabama A&M last year had 11 points, shot 40% from 3-point range. Long Beach State was one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last year, but a good rebounding team, and I do think that because they were able to bulk up a little bit in terms of their outside shooting, that allowed them to be able to get the job done. Willing to lay 1 and nothing more with Long Beach State, and I did set my total 159.5. Long Beach State just perennially one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, and I think that you're staring at a DePaul bunch that is going to be pretty bad on defense. So it's a spot where I'm going to be willing to lay it with Long Beach State and looking at the under. 659, 660 on the betting board. UC San Diego is playing us to the San Diego Toreros. UC San Diego is between a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite. Seeing a straight 4 out there as well. 151.5 to 152 is your total. And set UC San Diego as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with them. The Toreros were able to get the job done a few nights ago against Jax St, but I do have massive question marks with what you're going to be able to get down low out of this San Diego team, because with San Diego, they lose so many of those good players like a Jaden Dallaire from a season ago. They had Eric Williams Jr., and now they're looking to start brand new with Wayne McKinney IV, who he's able to give you some nice scoring. I believe he might actually be the third and not the fourth, but the long line of McKinney sees this one, averaging about 16 points per contest thus far this season. But I mean, really, other than what you've been able to get out of Kevin Patton Jr., who's come in as a 6'8" true freshman, nobody's been able to grab a board for this team. Meanwhile, for UC San Diego, you do have guys I like down low. And Wiwa Tawat Jones has been able to give you about 10 rebounds per game. Hopefully I said that name correctly. I don't think that I did, but we move on. Emmanuel Shaminga, who last season, he was very rock solid for the team. He's been dealing with a little bit of injury, but now you get back to the fold. J-Ron Brooks, who began his career in the Pac-12, actually spent time with both the USC and Washington, limited to 8 games last year, and that small sample size at about 10 points, 6 boards, capable of shooting threes at 6'9". That is massive for this team. And then you've got Bryce Pope, who is a good go-to scorer that averaged double figures a season ago. Has always been a little bit of an inconsistent three-point shooter, but looked very good. Now number 1 for UC San Diego. With this UC San Diego squad, they were able to put up 95 points against Denver. I don't think they're going to be quite duplicating that. UC San Diego, typically a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. Meanwhile, the San Diego Toreros, they're looking to crank up the tempo a little bit more, though they have given up fewer than 65 points in each of their first 2 games. I do think that this total is set a bit too high. I do think that things are going to be dialed back a little bit in a big-time rivalry matchup. I set my total 142.5, diving under, and with UC San Diego, willing to lay up to 4 with them. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game. 661, 662. You've got UC Irvine playing us to New Mexico State. New Mexico State is an underdog of between 7 and 7.5 points. Totals anywhere between 141 and 142.5. New Mexico State made them underdogs of 11.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Zot for the Anteaters after they had a rough night number 1. The money came in on them against San Jose State, and they made like your buddy at the bar and could not close. But I do think that this is going to be a little bit more terrific for them, as we've got a New Mexico State team that literally lost 100% of their scoring from a season ago. I like the coaching hire in Jason Newton. I do think that he's going to be able to elevate this program moving forward, but they brought in a lot of 2-time transfers that right now just are not going to be able to take the floor in general, like Femi Otakala. He's currently on the fold for this team. You were expecting him to be a nice takeover guy. They do bring in Jalen Jackson-Posey, who's north of a 40% three-point shooter at Stephen F. Austin. He's going to be good to go, but you have to be questioning the size of this team as down low as well, as they've got Robert Carpenter, Clarence Jackson, a pair of guys who have been well-traveled. You got to think that they're going to be able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game, but the 7-footer in Davion Bradford, he has been unable to take the floor thus far. Began his career at Kansas State, was at Wake Forest last season. He's another one of those 2-time transfers that they are missing, and this would be a completely different handicap if those guys would be out there on the floor. Meanwhile, UC Irvine, they don't have to worry about that because they just won't really bring in transfers. You've got Ben Lucan, who last season as a 7'1" gentleman shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, double-figure amount of points, right around 5 to 6 rebounds per game. Devin Tills has good versatility. He a season ago shot north of 40% from three-point range, and then Pierre Cockrell, he's just a really good facilitator. Honestly, not the world's worst shooter, but I mean, he always just puts himself in a pass-first position. Last season was able to give up 5 assists per contest, even though UC Irvine did lose a lot of their top scorers from three-point range, like Dawson Baker and company from the season ago. They still have Justin Owen, who last year at about 7 points per contest, gives you a steal per game, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. UC Irvine, I think that they are just ahead of this New Mexico State team, because with New Mexico State, there's a lack of chemistry, and guys that they were expecting to be out there just are not. So, set UC Irvine as an 11.5 point favorite, going to be willing to lay the number, and made my total 137.5, diving in on the under. UC Irvine, perennially one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, so going under and willing to lay with the Anteaters. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-501, 306-502. Brown is going to be playing us to Loyola, Maryland. What can Brown do for you? Well, they need to win by double figures for you to be able to make money off of them. They're between 10 and 10.5 point favorites. Totals between 142.5 and 144.5. I did set my line at 10, so now that we're getting to 10.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Maryland. Loyola Maryland, a less than savory night number 1 against Florida, but you bring back the Elich brothers, who they were dealing with injuries and just general off-the-court issues a season ago, but you also bring back someone in Deion Perry, who's able to give you about 3 assists per contest. Golden DK at about 6'9". He's able to supply about 6 to 7 rebounds per game. Very nice rim protector. And on the flip side for Brown, this team really hangs their hat on defense. Last year, a top 55 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I think they're going to be able to elevate even further this year. And you've got Keno Lilly Jr., who last season was a very good primary scorer, shot about 39.9% from three-point range throughout his career. Last year had 17 points, 2.5 assists per contest. Nana Owusu Anane, along with Aaron Cooley, our pair of guys are able to do a nice job of being able to pull in some boards as well. And then I also do like the fact that you now back in the fold after he was banged up throughout the year last year. Kalu Anea, he was limited to 18 games a season ago, but when he was out there, he was able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Brown, I think, is going to be able to do a solid job on the glass, but I do think that with Loyola Maryland having Perry running the guard spot, I do think that it's going to be able to keep this team at bay in a game that I think is going to be very low scoring. You've got a Loyola Maryland team that has to get up for an 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 a.m. tip, and I do think that that's going to take it out of a lot of these guys. So I did set my line at 10, being able to get 10.5. Going to be taking the points with Loyola Maryland, and set my total at 134.5, so going under. 306.503, 306.504. UConn plays us to Stone Hill. Stone Hill, an underdog between 34.5 and 35.5 points. Your total is 138 to 138.5. I set my line at 28.5. Stone Hill honestly looked pretty solid as a team that came up to the D1 level last season. Now, I fully recognize that last time UConn did not cover a non-conference game, you have to go all the way back to the 2021-22 season, as they covered or had a push in every single one of them last season, but it does feel like we are now being very badly taxed for the success that UConn has had out of conference. And for Stone Hill, you've got someone in Max Zagorowski. Yes, the brother of one Mr. Zagorowski that was over there at Creighton a few seasons ago. That gives you good versatility at right around about 6'7", 6'8", let it fly from 3, a career 42% three-point shooter at the D1 level last year, and about 4 boards per contest. This team is going to be eaten alive down low by Donovan Clingan. Donovan Clingan played 15 minutes night number 1. He was dealing with some off-season injuries. You got to expect sort of the same workload here. I do think that UConn going to be looking to get him up to speed a little bit after last season. He really didn't play much more than like 13, 14 or so minutes. I do think that UConn going to be very, very much enthused to be able to get some backups in this game. And I do think that Pano Paladivis, who comes over from Hartford, he's going to be able to help out this Stone Hill team that was able to give the team about 6 rebounds per game a season ago. UConn's going to be able to dominate this game. There's no question about it. Tristan Newton, he a season ago was about a 10-point per game scorer, but really took off towards back half of the season. He's picking up right where he left off. And then one of the better freshmen in all of college basketball, Stephon Castle. He looked very good in the opening game, 12 points in 19 minutes. I think that UConn rules, especially with Cam Spencer now being in full, but I do think that we're going to see a lot of the backups for UConn. UConn probably going to be looking to make sure that they just have a healthy team going into their bigger non-conference games. I did set this line at 28.5 as a result, so 35, just a little bit too lofty for me, and I did set my total at 142.5. Stone Hill, when they were in non-conference play, they were willing to play with a little bit more tempo. They were in the NEC, and just those NEC teams made them look slower than what they truly were, and I think that because you do get a lopsided game, turns into open gym where there's going to be a lot of, shall we say, lax defense on both sides. So, going to be taking a look at the over by total 142.5 and taking the points with Stone Hill. 306.505, 306.506. You've got Wofford, and they play us a High Point. High Point hopes to not be a low point, as between 3.5 and 4.5 point underdogs. Your total is between 147 and 147.5. With High Point, I set them as underdogs of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Wofford. We saw things get really, really bad for High Point a season ago, and with High Point, they do lose a lot of the top scorers that they had a season ago as well, so there's a lot of roster turnover. And for Wofford, they did lose quite a few guys that were so big for this team a season ago. Jackson Pavelski was a really nice facilitator. He's now over at Iowa State, but the team did a nice job of being able to reload a little bit around Corey Tripp. Tripp was one of their top scorers from a season ago, just under a double figure amount of points per game. He should be having the ball in his hands quite a bit. And Kyle Filerwich, he was one of the few guys that could be able to give you some rebounds down low with Filerwich, right around 7 points, 5 rebounds per game. He should be able to take over for the likes of Messiah Jones, BJ Mack, and company, and this team does a very good job of just always being able to find a young guy to be able to help out this offense. And this year, I think it's Quentin Meza. Meza in the opening night game, 8 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. Like what I've seen out of him. Heard some good things along the recruiting front for him as well. It feels like Wofford just has one of those guys every single year, so something very encouraging on that front. Meanwhile, for this High Point team, it is a squad that brings back Abdoulaye Thiam, who is a nice double-figure scorer from last year, but that said, it's a pretty brand spanking new team. You're going to need Bryson Childress to be able to step up after the last few seasons. He's been a nice role player. Last year, he had like 5 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, but not a guy that's really able to dole out the ball, and that's really what is ailing the team. You did see in the season opener for the team, Keza Grifa, who he comes over from the non-D1 level, began his career over at UTEP. He was able to give the team 9 assists, but that was at a very low level of competition. I wonder if High Point is going to be able to take care of the ball. One of the biggest issues for them last season is that they played a little bit too fast for their own good, and Wofford, they were deplorable on defense a season ago. I do think that Wofford defense returns a little bit more to form, so I did set my total at 144, diving in on the under. I do think that High Point going to be dialing back their tempo from what we saw from a disastrous 2022-23 season, so like the under, and with Wofford, willing to lay up to 7.5 with them. 306-507, 306-508. Houston is playing us to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi, an underdog of between 31 and 32 points, 139 to 140.5 is your total. Set my line at 31. Now that we're getting to 32, that is going to be a buy point for me on Texas A&M Corpus Christi. And this is a Houston team that over the last 4 years, they've covered right in the neighborhood about 75% of their games, in which they have been north of a 20-point favorite. But Corpus Christi, even though they do go through a little bit of a coaching change in the offseason, losing Coach Lutz to Western Kentucky, I do think that this team is still going to be relatively solid out there in a Southern Conference. Let's call it what it is. It's not necessarily the world's greatest conference in the world. And for Houston, this team always does a good job of being able to pound the glass. You got Juwan Roberts back from a season ago. Jamal Shedd, he's just so good at the guard spot, 10 points. He's able to give you about 5 assists. Does a good job being able to generate steals. And I love the fact that they brought in LJ Cryer as well to be able to help out with a 3-point shooting in tandem with Damian Dunn from Temple. But with Texas A&M Corpus Christi, this is a team that has been able to make the NCAA tournament each out of the last 2 seasons. They're going to be leaning upon Jordan Roberts a lot more this year. After a season ago, he was a nice little reserve guy that shot 38.5% from 3, didn't do much other than 2 threes. He's going to need to help facilitate a little bit more offense, but they found themselves nice little Swiss Army knife as well in Gary Clark. Clark began his career at Tarleton State. Last season at Tarleton State, a school where they require you to be one of those Swiss Army knife sort of guys as well. He was able to see some meaningful minutes, was a back half of the rotation sort of guy, and I do think that they get a little bit of elevation as well from Marion Humphrey. Humphrey began his career at San Diego, played at UT Arlington last year, where he was able to give out a few assists per contest. He's able to chip in there a little bit over a steal per game. Has always been about a mid-30s 3-point shooter. The Texas A&M Corpus Christi team, despite the fact that they did lose their coach in the offseason, did a nice job of being able to stockpile some talent via the transfer portal. Bringing in Dane Prim is something that I do like as well. So I think the number is starting to get out of whack. Houston, they always do a tremendous job on defense, but they're also not an up-tempo team, and that means that they have fewer possessions to cover this Mondo number of 31. And I do think that the Houston defense is going to be very stifling. Corpus Christi can have a tough time being able to get to 50, so I did set my line at a 31, getting 32 or more. Going to be taking the points with Corpus Christi, making my total 133, so also diving in on the under. 306-509, 306-510. You've got UNC Asheville playing us to UNC Wilmington. Wilmington, an underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. Your total is between 143 and 144. I said Asheville is a 2.5 point favorite. I do think that they're going to be able to bounce back from that Michigan loss, and as we are finding out, Michigan does look like they are going to be the real deal this year. And with UNC Asheville, they were a top 30 team in the country last year in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, going up against a UNC Wilmington team that has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball last few seasons. Wilmington has been a very good cover team. If you dive in on the analytics a little bit more, they have been one of the luckiest teams in all of college basketball. Now, I do think that you sort of create your own luck as well, but with UNC Wilmington, there is a few moving pieces with this team. They bring back Tarzarian White, their top scorer from a season ago, 15.5 points, right around 5 boards per contest, and Shaquem Phillips, has always been about a 9 to 10 point per game scorer. He is back in the fold as well, but they do lose Amari Kelly, who was a nice low post player for the team, was able to lend a little bit of versatility, and they're going to look to lump KJ Jenkins into the fold as well. After at New Mexico last year, he was able to log for the team about 7.5 points per contest, a career 38.5% three-point shooter. That should be able to elevate a team that has been spotty with regards to their three-point shooting, but I just don't think that Wilmington going to be able to match up with Drew Pember. Drew Pember, I mean, this guy is just absolutely incredible. At 6'11", last year shot 37.5% from three-point range with 21 points, 9 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. Forget about major basketball. He's one of the most versatile players in all of college basketball. And then you team them up with Fletcher Abey, a guy that has shot in the high 30s from three-point range throughout his college basketball career. Caleb Burgess, he's able to do a nice job rolling it out. He's got some familiarity with these guys. He began his career over at Hofstra as well. UNC Asheville has some of the most returning minutes of any team in all of college basketball. And to the credit of UNC Wilmington, most of their guys are back from a season ago as well. So you've got two very experienced teams, one in Wilmington that looks to play super duper slow, one in Asheville that looks to speed things up a little bit. Good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that things get slowed down a hair with UNC Asheville. Their biggest kryptonite is the fact that they do turn the ball over quite a bit. And going against a Wilmington team that doesn't force a lot of turnovers, I think will win out for Asheville. I set Asheville as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, made my total 140.5, so going under to go along with Asheville. 306-511, 306-512. Tulsa is going to be playing us Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word, an underdog of 13.5 to 14 points. Your total between 140.5 and 142.5. With Incarnate Word, I did set them as an underdog of 11 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Tulsa has been just a brutal cover team over the last few years. They covered 4 games a season ago. I do think that it's going to be much more rosy this season. Eric Conkle, the coach over at Tulsa, he's better than what he showed a season ago. And hey, in their season opener against Central Arkansas, they looked much better. They were able to cover that minus 13.5 number. So we're already cooking with some gas with Tulsa. But with that said, for Tulsa, I do think that they're a little bit of a work in progress. I do like that Eric Conkle decided to harken back to his days at Louisiana Tech and bring in someone like a Kobe Williams, who is a double-figure scorer, mid-30s three-point shooter. I think he's going to be very good for this bunch. On top of that, you do bring in Isaiah Barnes, who he was just an afterthought at Michigan the last 2 seasons, but has some ability, a former top 200 recruit that I think is going to be able to help out this backcourt. In the front court, I do question what you're going to be able to get down low. Jared Garcia did have 10 rebounds night number 1, but I mean, over at Charlotte, just really could not get off the bench. I don't think that he's going to be able to duplicate that too much. And for Incarnate Word, while they do lose some of their primary guys from a season ago, Jonathan Cisse was their top scorer. I like what I saw out of Sky Wicks night number 1. Sky Wicks began his career at Missouri State, went down to the non-Division I level, and was honestly a relatively highly touted non-D1 transfer. He had 26 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists in the team season opener. I love what he's able to bring to the table. You've got someone in Joshua Morgan that is able to do a solid job of being able to give the team some scoring as well. And then Sean Robinson over at Austin Peay. He was last season a mid-30s three-point shooter, 10 points, 4 boards. This is the second time he's transferred. He does a good job of being able to pick up systems in general. Incarnate Word, they're also looking a little bit thin on the glass, but I do think that with regards to what you're able to get in the backcourt for Incarnate Word from TJ Ford Jr., yes, the son of that TJ Ford, the team is going to be able to hold in this game. So I do think that Incarnate Word going to be a little bit peskier. Set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to take those points. I did set my total 143. Tulsa was brutally bad on defense last year. Incarnate Word was pretty bad on defense last year as well. And I do think that there's a slight chance this might be close enough for some late game felling. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Incarnate Word. 306-513. 306-514. Arizona State plays us to Texas Southern. Texas Southern a 14 to a 14.5 point underdog, and total on this game it is 141 after 142. Arizona State looked horrible on national TV against Mississippi State. They were a BK network write-up of mine, and I felt very bad about giving that one out because they laid a turd. That was not terrific, but I do think that they're going to be able to bounce back quite a bit in this one. I did set them as an 18-point favorite. This is just not the same Texas Southern team that we've seen in past years. typically this team does a solid job going into the transfer portal, bringing in some guys that should be able to help elevate this team, but they don't have quite as much of that this year. Now, they do have Shaquille O'Neal's son, Shakir O'Neal, who he was with the program last year, very limited. I think that he was dealing with injuries or something like that because he just did not see a lot of the floor last season. In the season opener, he was able to put in there 8 points, and then they do bring in Jonathan Cisse from Incarnate Word, who last season he was a nice double-figure scorer that was able to shoot it well from three-point range, but past that, you've got a bunch of men of mystery. PJ Henry last year was a double-figure scorer, but 4 of your top 6 scorers from a season ago are gone. This is a Texas Southern team that they don't have as much size as they've had in past years, and even though Arizona State, they're a little bit of a liability down low. Alonzo Gaffney is out with a little bit of an injury. He played sparingly night number 1, about 17 minutes. I do think that they're going to try to get him out there a little bit more in this game. You saw Brian Settlebungu, who was over at Tulsa last year, being able to pull in there right around 8 rebounds per game. Zane Meeks is someone that began his career at Nevada along with San Francisco at about 6'8". He's able to pop threes. And then you've got Frankie Collins, who last year doled out about 4 assists per contest. He's able to generate some steals. And Jose Perez, he comes in from West Virginia. Did not look good night number 1. And I do wonder how that chemistry is going to be looking the first few weeks. He got to Arizona State in October after everything that happened at West Virginia, but I do think that this is going to be a grind them out, slow, grimy game. Texas Southern, perennially one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Look at the roster right now, and you wonder where the three-point shooting is going to be coming from. And for Arizona State, they've turned themselves into a little bit more of a defense-oriented team, and we saw it on, I believe it was Wednesday. They are unable to put the ball in the basket themselves, so somebody told closer to a 138, diving in on the under, and I did set Arizona State as a favorite of 18 points. Going to be one to lay the number, and taking a look at the under. 36-5-15, 36-5-16. UMBC plays those to Marist. Marist finds themselves as underdogs of between 2.5 and 3 points, and your total, it is anywhere between 145.5 and 146. I really didn't put UMBC any higher in terms of my power rankings after their close call against Louisville, just because Louisville stinks, and I put them as only 1.5 point favorites. Being able to get a full 3 here with Marist, I'm going to be willing to take those points. I actually liked what I saw out of Marist to begin the season. And for Marist, this is typically a bunch that does a very good job of being able to guard the 2. They typically have a lot of issues with regards to guarding that 3-point arc, but I like that they brought in Max Allen, someone who began his career at San Jose State, really couldn't get out there on the floor too much, but at 6'9", he figures to take over for what we saw 8 seasons ago, where it was just all about Patrick Gardner and what he was able to provide down low. But you bring back Isaiah Brickner, a guy that had a few assists per contest, was able to give the team a double-figure amount of points per game, and you're really looking at something if Cam Ferris, who in 2 seasons at Robert Morris shot north of 40% from 3-point range, can find a little bit more of that outside shooting touch. Meanwhile, for UMBC, I like that they have Deion Brown from a season ago, who was one of their primary scorers, but he's pretty much the only of their top 6 scorers that returns from a season ago. Bryce Johnson, a nice 9-point per game scorer from Chicago State, he comes in and he had 21 points in the opening game. And you do have Max Lorsa Lloyd, who comes in from Penn. Last year at Penn, he was averaging like 6 to 7 rebounds per game out of conference, fell completely out of favor in Ivy League play. I'm not sure what happened there, but he's a capable rebounder. But I do think the Mariners going to be able to hold up down low with Allen coming into the fold. I do think that the Mariners backcourt going to be able to match up with a UMBC team that has a whole bunch of moving parts. So can I say UMBC has 1.5 point favorite? I'm going to be willing to take the 3 with Mariners. Did set my total at a 133.5. Mariners is perennially a very slow tempo team, and UMBC, they were pretty solid on offense last year. They were ghastly on defense, but they're not necessarily a super fast team as well. So I do think the Mariners style is going to win out, and UMBC missing a lot of their good 3-point shooting from a season ago. Going to be diving in on the under and going to be willing to take the points with Mariners. 306-5-17, 306-5-18. Coppin St is on the road facing off against Mount St. Mary's. The Mount is between 14.5 to 15-point favorites, and your total is between 134 and 135.5. I could only set the Mount as 11.5 point favorites. Now, Coppin State is looking like a bottom 10 team minimum in college basketball. They decided that they were going to be canning a legend in Maryland basketball in the offseason when they made their coaching change, as Juan Dixon was at the helm of the program last season, but for the Mount to be laying this sort of a number, it is a little bit ridiculous, as they lose a lot of their top scorers from a season ago as well. And the Mount has always been a team that's had those good players like Malik Jefferson and company down low that are able to bang and are able to grab rebounds. They just don't have as much of that this season. You do have George Tinsley, who he began his career at Binghamton last year, was able to give the team a few rebounds. I do like Josh Reeves in the backcourt. Josh Reeves, season ago, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range at a very, very limited sample size. You go back to more of his full allotment of minutes 2 seasons ago, 6.5 points per contest, mid-30s point shooter, but I do think that Justin Winston, a little bit of an elevator, began his career at Robert Morris along with Stony Brook. He's been a solid player, was limited last season, but I do like what I'm seeing out of him last season. Put in there about 8 points per contest. I think he's an upside guy now. I was talking about Mount St. Mary's losing a lot of their guys that were so solid down low. Got a Coppin St team that they really don't have any sort of forwards whatsoever. I think that perhaps you could have something at 6'11" Luka Tekavicic. He looks like he's getting a very limited amount of minutes though, probably because he is so stinking raw. And they are going to be looking at Cameron Sparrow, a true freshman that comes in from the Baltimore area that has looked relatively solid from 3-point range, but guys like Malik Battle, DeQuan Copeland, transfers that they have brought in have been less than terrific, but not like this Mount St. Mary's team is doing a lot terrific as well. Mount St. Mary's plays at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball. You do have a good 3-point shooter, Xavier Lipscomb, but I think this is going to be a very interesting battle of tempos. Mount St. Mary's, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. Coppin State, a run it and gun it team. I did set my total as a result at a 141.5. I do think that Mount St. Mary's is going to be able to find a way to be able to make some open threes after they shot 16.5% from 3. Night number 1 against Maryland. So looking at the over, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with Coppin State, set them as more of 11.5 point underdogs. 306-519, 306-520. Seton Hall is going to be playing us a Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as 18.5 point underdogs, and your totals between 146 and 147. And with Seton Hall, could I make them 15 point favorites? I am going to be willing to take the points with our good friends Fairleigh Dickinson. As for Fairleigh Dickinson, no doubt about it, changing of the guard from a season ago with Tobin Anderson now being out of the fold, but they do return some of those key pieces that allowed them to be able to win a pair of games in the NCAA tournament. You've gotten some good production out of Ainsley Elmore along with Joe Munden Jr., a pair of guys that will give you double figures a season ago. He was glued a little bit more to the bench, but Sebastian Lamute last season, he was able to give the team about 4 points per contest after 2 years ago. He was more of a mid-30s point shooter, 6 points per game. Looks like he is seeing a lot more minutes this season. Fairleigh Dickinson, once again, does have a little bit of a shortage of size, but they did bring in 6'6" Joel Emmanuel, who it looks like is going to be able to help elevate this team down low after last season. He was a little bit more of an afterthought. Flip side for Seton Hall, they are going to be able to win this battle down low. There is no question about it, but they don't have quite the size that they had a season ago themselves. They're going to be looking much more to their backcourt. They bring in Dylan Adi Awusu, who was able to put in there about 8 to 9 points per contest, so he's been a solid 3-point shooter at St. John's. And you got Kadari Richmond, just a stat sheet stuff for last year, about like 10 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. He's going to shoot it well from 3-point range. Trey Davis, so he's been a solid 3-point shooter as well. But Jaden Bediako, Elijah Hutchins Everett, these are up transfers with Bediako coming over from Santa Clara. Hutchins Everett, I mean, he was solid at Austin Peay, but he wasn't necessarily anything too terrific as well. So even though Fairleigh Dickinson is going to be outsized, I don't think the Seton Hall is going to completely dominate on the glass. And it's a Seton Hall team that I just have my trepidations with in general. They had a tough time with St. Peter's in the season opener where they shot 6 of 14 from 3-point range, but had 13 turnovers in that game. They were not looking too great on the glass themselves, and I do think that Seton Hall is going to be a little bit out of sorts against a Fairleigh Dickinson team that can generate a few turnovers. So I did set my line at a 15. I'm going to be willing to take 18.5 here with Fairleigh Dickinson. Made my total 137. Looks like Seton Hall going to be playing a little bit more of a slower tempo in Fairleigh Dickinson, unlike in past years with the coaching regime change. They're going to be playing a little bit more slowly as well. So diving in on the under and taking the points with Fairleigh Dickinson. 306-521, 306-522. NJIT is playing us to St. Peter's. St. Peter's is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite on the road with your total between 131.5 and 133.5. I made NJIT the 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with this NJIT bunch. I do think that they're going to be able to do a much better job this year than they've been able to do the past few years. They had a little bit of a coaching change, and Rashawn Storrs, who was a very solid interim coach over at Manhattan last season, he's a part of that coaching staff as well. And I do like the pieces that they've really been able to bring in. They were able to get Elijah Buchanan, who 2 seasons ago, he was limited due to injury a season ago at Manhattan, but he was about a 9 point per game scorer, someone that is able to give you a little bit of rebounding, has some size. I like his overall game going up against a St. Peter's squad that was able to hold relatively tight night number 1 against Seton Hall, but you've got your question marks with regards to 3-point shooting and who in that is going to bring up the ball. Marcus Randolph is probably going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, comes over from Richmond where he was a little bit of an afterthought, but And he was really the only guy that was facilitating for St. Peter's. Night number one, there was a lot of isolation. Now you do have Latrell Reed, who's got some good versatility. A season ago, he had 6'3", 6'4", doled out about 3.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 5.5 points per game. Did pretty much everything other than shoot from the outside, but you just have a shortage of shooting options in general for the team. Corey Washington, he's right around 6'6", incapable of shooting threes, but last year had about 5 boards per contest. Just a bunch of misfit choice in general. Muhammad Salle was relatively solid down low as well. And St. Peter's, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball season ago. NJIT, I think that they're going to look to elevate their tempo just a skoge. I did set my total, though, at a 130.5 because I do think that for NJIT, they've got a little bit of a shortage of outside shooting as well. But I do like the way that Adam Hess was able to give the team double figures towards the back half of the season last year at 14 points in the team season opener. So he's picking up right where he left off. Sebastian Robinson is someone that I've got my eye on as well as a freshman that went a little bit under the radar and was a good find for NJIT along with Tariq Francis. NJIT did a good job of being able to find some talent in the local area to be able to pair up with someone like a Makai Gray, who last season was a starter that logged 7 points, was not a great three-point shooter, but got better as the season went along. I like NJIT in this ordeal. Maybe they've got a little bit less size than St. Peter's, but St. Peter's just all sorts of out of sorts in the backcourt, and that's why I think that NJIT should be able to get the job done. So looking at NJIT outright on the money line, set my total at a 130.5. So taking the under and the underdog, NJIT outright on the money line. 306.523, 306.524. Winthrop plays host to Drexel. Drexel finds themselves as 1 to 1.5 point underdogs. Total is between 137.5 and 139. Not a great performance in the first game of the season for Drexel, but they do have a really good post presence, as Amari Williams last year, double-figure scorer, 8 points, a block, a steal per contest. I really like what he's able to do down low, but they're going to be going up against a squad here in Winthrop that I do think that they're going to be able to come along just a little bit with their defense. Their offense last year was fine. As a matter of fact, their offense was quite good a season ago, but they were just limited by the fact that they could not get stops to save their lives. Now that they're a year older, a year wiser in this Mr. Mark Prosser system, I do think that they're going to be able to elevate quite a bit. You've got KJ Doucette, who has been able to give the team 29 points in the first 2 games of the season. He comes in from non-Division I Fort Valley, was able to absolutely tear it up. And then you've got Kelton Telford. Telford a season ago, he was really the team's primary guy, 16 points, 8 boards, not necessarily too much of a shot blocker or an eraser, but he's able to do a nice job with this low post offensive game. And then you've got Kayshawn Harrison along Sincere McMahon, a pair of guys that are able to facilitate in the backcourt. Harrison, by far the better three-point shooter of the two. Last season shot 45% from three-point range. I like what these guys are able to do. And then an under-the-radar transfer in Alex Timmerman, who comes over from Bucknell, where he was a starter last 2 seasons, was able to log about 7 rebounds per game. That helps out Winthrop's overall defense. And for Drexel, very low and slow team a season ago that was in the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. They do have their main facilitator back in Justin Moore last year at 3 assists per contest, and he missed a few games last season. You could tell that what he meant when he was on/off the floor. You also need Yimi Butler to be able to step up just a little bit because he was a really good just spot-up shooter. Shot 45% from 3 with 8.5 points per contest a season ago, but didn't facilitate, didn't rebound. If you can get him to be a little bit more well-rounded along with Lucas Monroe coming in for Penn, I do think that you're staring at something with the squad, but I do think that for Winthrop, they should be able to do a nice job coming along with their defense, and I do think that for Drexel, they're going to have a tough time matching up with all these weapons along the outside for Winthrop, and I do think that for Winthrop, they're going to allow some open shots as well. Set this line at 6 with Winthrop. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5. Going to be taking a look at the over as well. I think that you could have late game following be able to help out with this total as well. So looking at the over and Winthrop laying the small number. 306.525, 306.526. Santa Clara plays those to St. Francis of Pennsylvania. St. Francis, 22.5 point underdogs with your total between 145 and 145.5. St. Francis has been really falling on some tough times to say the least. They lose pretty much 5 other top 6 scores from a season ago. I do think that this is a little bit too lofty. I said Santa Clara as an 18-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Santa Clara. The squad is very much built more around their posts this year rather than built around their backcourt. Last year, Santa Clara had Braden Podzmetsky, who had all sorts of versatility. 2 years ago was Jalen Williams, who was able to become a first-round draft pick. So they've really done a good job of being able to pluck out talent. You just don't have one of those guys. This year, Carlos Marshall was very much limited to like 5 games last season. He's someone that when I was at Tennessee State a few seasons ago, he was able to shoot about 40% from 3, a double-figure score. And Adama Ball was one of the better international transfers a few seasons ago. Just was glued on on the bench because Arizona had so much depth, but now you've got Francisco Cafaro, who comes over from Arizona. He had 8 rebounds in his season debut. I like what you're able to get out of Christoph Tilley. He's another big man, and then Johnny O'Neal is more of that versatile big man. Did not have a single point in the team season opener, but was able to grab 9 boards, and while he was at American as a 6'9" combo player, was able to shoot it very well from 3-point range. St. Francis, meanwhile, they are going to get decimated on the glass as they don't necessarily have a ton of size. You're most likely going to be looking at 6'8" Miles Webb to be able to step up. He's given the team 8 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season after he just was limited due to injury a season ago. Your main scorer from the season ago, Cam Gregory, he is going to be able to help out a little bit. Last year, 5 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and was able to dole out 2.5 assists per game. Problem is, I just don't know who he's going to be able to dole out the ball to. You're probably going to be looking at a little bit more of Chris Moncrief moving forward after he began his career at Evansville. Wasn't able to really get out there on the floor too much, but he is 6'6". He's got a little bit of versatility, so they're going to be really looking to rely upon him. And then you've got Bobby Rosenberger III, a true freshman that I was a little bit bullish on coming out of high school. Hasn't necessarily found his footing quite yet, but with Santa Clara, this is certainly a little bit more of a new-look team, and I do think that Cam Gregory going to be able to do a good job of being able to facilitate some offense for the St. Francis team. I think Santa Clara should be able to win this game and do so quite convincingly, but I think that Santa Clara going to be looking to dial back their tempo a little bit as they are built more around big men, so I did set my line at 18. Going to be taking a look at the under. And with St. Francis, I am going to take the points with them, set them as 18-point underdogs. 306-527, 306-528. Columbia is going to be playing us to Albany. Albany underdogs of 6.5 points. Totals between 148.5 and 149.5. I could only set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Albany. Albany certainly has been trying to find a replacement for Gerald Drumgoole here at the early part of the season, but Dwayne Killings was able to have a little bit more to work with this offseason rather than 2 off seasons ago where there were some allegations of harassment and players that were coming out and they were not pleased with what he had done with the program, to say the least. But this offseason, he brings in someone in Sebastian Thomas who was able to see some starts over at Rhode Island, was not a primary scorer but was able to dole out right around 3 assists per contest. I do like his overall game. And Aaron Reddish, of relation to Cam Reddish, looks like he's in for a big year as well. Last year, 8.5 points per contest, shot about 37% from 3-point range. He, in the first few games of the season, has looked relatively solid thus far. 9 points, 8 boards in that game against UMass. Season ago, he was able to surge a little bit towards the back half of the campaign, and they bring in Tyler Bertram, who really couldn't find his footing over at UAB, but when he was in the America East at Binghamton a few seasons ago, double-figure scorer. Now, the best guard in this game, Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa. He plays for Columbia. Last season, he was able to give the team 13 points, 4 assists, solid 3-point shooter. Problem is, he had nothing around him. Some of these freshmen, they are starting to now develop. Blair Thompson was a former top 300 recruit. He had 15 points in the team season debut. I think that you've got something here in 6'10". Zine Adine Baderi, who comes in from Algeria season ago, 8 points, 4 boards. Was able to do a relatively okay job down low, but you could tell that he was a little bit raw. But for Columbia, this team really lacks a lot of 3-point shooting. They are one of the worst teams in the country at being able to take care of the ball, and they have been dreadful on defense. Meanwhile, with Albany, when they had success 2 seasons ago, they were a little bit more of a slow tempo team. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total 142.5. I think that Albany going to be looking to get back to their roots, play a little bit more slowly, and a lot of the strengths for this Columbia team are down low with guys like the gentleman from Algeria, with what you've got out of Blair Thomason as well. So this is a spot where I'm going to be looking at the under, but I do think that with Albany, they're going to be able to do a solid job with their backcourt, with Thomas being able to run things. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and we'll take north of 5 with Albany. 306-529, 306-530. UNLV plays us as Stetson. The Hatters are between 9 to 10 point underdogs. Totals between 148.5 and 150.5 with UNLV. Do I set them as 7-point favorites? I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stetson. Stetson does lose a few pieces from last year. Someone like a Wiesa Ponzo, who at 6'7", was a very good 3-point shooter. It's going to be a loss felt by the team, but when it comes to Stetson, they do bring back Jalen Blackman. Blackman was very good in the backcourt for a Stetson team that was one of the better teams in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. A brutal bottom 40 defensive team, but an awesome offensive team that played on one of the slower styles in all of college basketball. Blackman last season, 15.5 points per game, was able to dole out about 2 assists per contest, and they got a very good night number 1 performance out of Aben Gebetriste, hopefully I said that correctly, comes in from Belgium, so a little bit of a tough name there. 10 points, 15 rebounds. Do question if that's going to be long-lasting, but what I do know is that Stefan Swenson is able to pass around the sugar. This guy last year shot 40% from 3, 11 points, 5 assists, while turning the ball over about 2 times per game. This is a Stetson team that's going to hang their hat on offense, and for UNLV, they're coming off of losing by 14 points at home to Southern, and if you watch that game, the game wasn't even really that close. UNLV, I do think, should be able to win the battle down low. Isaiah Cottrell is a 6'10", 6'11", former top 200 recruit that comes in from West Virginia. He did have 7 rebounds night number 1, and I do expect UNLV to find their footing a little bit more in the backcourt. You can tell that they were trying to adapt to life without one of their top guys in Keshawn Gilbert, EJ Harkless. These were a pair of guys that combined to average about 30 points per contest, so that really hurt them. You do have Luis Rodriguez back in the fold, who's been very versatile for this team over the last few seasons, and I do think that they're going to get a boost from Jalen Hill. Last year, he was a starter at Oklahoma with nearly 6 boards, has always been able to pop threes as a 6'6", a little bit of stretch player, but only at about a 30% clip. Justin Webster, he was able to put in their buckets over at Hawaii, but feels like it's a little bit of a work in progress for UNLV. Stetson is not really a team that scours the transfer portal too much. They've got a lot of the same pieces back from a season ago. Their main addition was Alec Ogletree, was able to put in their 15 points night number 1, spent a lot of time with UNC Wilmington, another slow tempo team, so he fits the style very well. I did set my total at 145. Stetson, I just don't think they're going to play a style with enough possessions to get this game over. Even though they're good on offense, they're brutal on defense, they're one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. So looking at the under, but UNLV a little bit more bearish on this team after that Southern loss. I could only make them a 7-point favorite, so taking the points and the under. 306-531, 306-532. Niagara is going to be playing us in Bucknell. The bracket bussin' Bison find themselves as underdogs of 10.5 to 11.5 points. Totals between 131.5 and 133.5, with Bucknell made them 10.5 point underdogs. So here at 11.5, that would be my buy point on Bucknell. Bucknell brings in John Griffin, who played at the program many years ago, so I do like the fit at coach. You tell that there's a lot of moving pieces with this team. They lose a lot of their top rebounders like Andre Screen along with Alex Zimmerman. These were a pair of guys that combined for darn near 14 rebounds per game, so they're looking for a little bit of size down low. They hope they have found it in 7-footer Noah Williamson, who a season ago, he just really did not play a lot for this team in general, so he's very raw, but you do have Alvin Edmonds, the 4th, along Jack Forrest, who have been able to do a solid job to begin the season. They've been able to combine for about 24.5 points per contest. Forrest began his career at St. Joe's a season ago, shot about 38.5% from 3-point range with 10 points per contest. Alvin Edmonds has always been a good 3-point shooter, but when you need more of his guys like Ian Mata, who's 6'6", a little bit of a versatile player that last year was a starter for the team, but wasn't necessarily a primary scorer. You need more out of these role players. Meanwhile, with Niagara, they've got a tried and true style. They're going to play super duper slow. They're going to make this thing an eyesore. They bring in Luke Bumlow, who a season ago over at Ball State was an afterthought after 2 years ago. He was an 11-point per game scorer that shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, so they're looking at him as a little bit of a reclamation project. You've got Ya Obeng-Mensa, who was over at UMBC a season ago, one of the few guys for UMBC that didn't shoot threes, but was able to give the team right in the neighborhood about 6.5 rebounds per game, so I like what he's able to bring to the table as well. Now, the team was dealt with a big blow. David Mitchell, who he was coming in from Brown, because he was in the Ivy League, they didn't give him a COVID year. You really feel bad for the kid, so that does take a little bit out of this Niagara team. I had to adjust my handicap a little bit accordingly. Randy Tucker has yet to be granted eligibility as well, so that's a little bit of an issue. We're waiting to see what he's able to do, as he was at UW Green Bay, 40% 3-point shooter, so this team is playing down just a skoge. They're going to be looking in the meantime to Braxton Bayless, who season ago was able to give the team about 5.5 points per contest, a steal per game, but not necessarily a great 3-point shooter. I think that helps out the Bucknell Bison in a game that I think is going to be a slow eyesore of a game. Niagara just under Greg Pauls has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, and for Bucknell, they have scored 61 points or fewer in their first 2 games of the season, so I do think that you're in for a grody game. I'm willing to take 11.5 or more with Bucknell, set them as 10.5 point underdogs, and here at north of 130, going to be diving in on the under. We wrap things up with 306-533, 306-534. Georgetown is playing us to Holy Cross. Holy Cross is an underdog between 15.5 to 16.5 points. Those between 147 and 148.5. I like Holy Cross here. I set them as 14.5 point underdogs. I'm going to take those points. Dave Polson comes in after didn't have a great tenure at George Mason, but had a ton of success in the Patriot League with Bucknell, led them to a few NCAA tournaments, and he's got a nice backcourt to be able to work with. Joe Octave, Will Batchelor, Bo Montgomery, these were all guys that put in there at least 9 points per contest a season ago. Montgomery is able to give you a little bit of facilitation, 2.5 assists, shot about 34.5% for three, and it's rare when you have a new coach come in and you've got pretty much your entire backcourt returning. They do lose their top scorer and rebounder in Gerald Gates, but Luth M. Kulapali, he's back from a season ago after he was limited to 2 games. If you take a look at what he did 2 seasons ago, was not a scorer down low, but was able to get like 4.5, 5 rebounds per game. I think that he's going to be a nice back to the basket guy. Holy Cross dealing with some depth issues, but for Georgetown, do have to be wondering what you're going to be able to get out of the team overall. They were able to really take it to Lemoyne in their season opener, but it's got a lot of misfit pieces that I do think that it's going to be fascinating to see how they coexist with one another. Ryan Mutombo has been a little bit of a bust ever since he was a highly thought of recruit, but you're bringing Supreme Cook from Fairfield, who last year he was their top scorer, was able to pull in their 8 rebounds per game. Jaden Epps had that 40-point game that everyone buzzed about in an exhibition and then scores 5 points in the season opener, but doled out 11 assists, did have a few turnovers along the way. Georgetown is going to need to clean that up with 17 turnovers. You can tell that there is a little bit of a lack of chemistry, as Jay Heath is one of the few guys that returns from a season ago along with Wayne Bristol. A lot of these other pieces, they're very much new look. Someone like a Rowan Brumba, former top 150 recruit, he should be able to help out in the backcourt as well. He had 13 points in that season opener. I view him a little bit more as a facilitator, but was able to show off some nice shooting touch. But this is a Holy Cross backcourt that has played together for quite a few years. I do think that that's going to be a little bit of a tough test for this Georgetown team, so I'm going to be willing to take those points with Holy Cross. I set them as 14.5 point underdogs. Did make my total 144.5. Dave Polson, when he was at Bucknell, was never super duper up-tempo, never was at George Mason as well. Georgetown, I think that they're going to be more of a mid-tempo team that looks to play some tough defense as well, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be taking the points with Holy Cross, and that wraps things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Mike Randle. Does great work over at FTN and FTN Bets. Join me in the last segment. If you like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_1. Keep in mind, letters EM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and I'm going to be joining you guys once again tomorrow and all throughout the season. So thank you so much for tuning in.